election. I'm Jacqueline Stanley.
And I'm Tom Monahan. First, we would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which RMIT stands, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. We would like to pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginals and Torres Strait Islander people today.
We would also like to pay respects to Carolyn Jones, who passed away this week at age 84. Ms Jones was a pioneer in journalism and a trailblazer for women working for the ABC for over 40 years. There's about 30 minutes before the polls close, but before we begin, we'd like to remind you that you can get involved on Twitter by using the hashtag RMIT election, and be sure to follow our Instagram on the handle at your screens now.
So Jackie, how are you feeling about tonight?
Feeling very excited, very keen for some data to come in. We've got all of our marginal seats ready to look at. We've got our data studio. I'm very interested by the fact that postal and pre-polling is over 30% this year. So up until election day today, actually 30% had decided really on which party and which candidate they would be choosing in their electorate. We also have Sam Varian here on the panel to give us a little analysis as the results come in. How are you feeling about tonight, Sam?
Yeah, I'm excited. I think it's going to be a really interesting contest. There's, especially with the Teal Independents and the Greens, there's a lot more besides the traditional two major parties that we usually look at. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I do know that it's going to be an interesting evening.
And we've had a lot of news that's come through today about the election, and with 30% of people already have chosen and made their mind up, some of the last minute ploys that have been attempted today may not actually do anything to the votes, may it?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's also last minute, and yeah, everyone's either made their mind up or they've already voted. So it really just makes you think what the purpose of it is, but we'll see whether it actually has any effect.
And the polls aren't really helping us either, are they? They're giving us a lot of kind of uncertainty about where it's going to go. We don't really know if we're going to have a majority, a minority, a hung parliament. There's a lot to play for tonight.
It's anyone's game.
It is. Now, we have Gabe in our data studio. Good evening, Gabe.
Hi guys, I'm coming to you from RMIT's brand new virtual studio where we'll be bringing you all of the data for the 2022 federal election. My name's Gabriel Rule and I'll be bringing you some segments on the issues that face voters when choosing our next Prime Minister. I'll also be joined by Lachlan later on in the studio who'll be bringing you live data as it comes in and then throwing back for analysis. Now, look, it is, as the other guys were saying, it is still anyone's game and there are still so many outliers in this election. But for political nerds like us, it's definitely going to be one to watch, one that we're all very excited about, and one that will likely change the course of our future. I'm going to throw back to you guys.
Thanks, Gabe.
Thank you, Gabe.
Now let's check in with some of our reporters who are around the state. Natalie, you're at the Auburn Hotel in Kooyong, am I right?
That's correct. Yes, I am in, of course, the wonderful Auburn Hotel. And Miss Ryan is going to have a private event here tonight.
Perfect. And then we've got Georgie. Where are you tonight, Georgie?
Hello, so I am in the electorate of Casey. I am currently at a polling booth in Lilydale, and I will be heading to a election party later on tonight, but I'm excited to see what happens.
Great.
And Narlan, you're in Sydney. Adriana, sorry, you're in Wentworth.
Adriana's in Wentworth.
Yes, I'm here in Wentworth. I'm here where David Sharma is going to held his function today. So very excited to see that. It's a very marginal electorate here. And yeah, let's see what's happened.
Fantastic. We can't wait to check back in with everyone. But let's take a look at what the opinion polls have been saying this week.
Yes, we will have a look now at those latest news opinion polls. They have been coming out and predicting tonight's results. Everyone is a bit skittish about the polls generally after 2019's polls incorrectly predicted a major win for Labor. But with that in mind, let's take a look at the latest results. The news poll, which comes out from The Australian, that was released last night and shows the two-party preferred vote with Labor leading the coalition at 53 to 47. Now, that's the same result as the most recent Ipsos, the Australian Financial Reviews poll. Now, looking at the other polls, we have got Resolve with a two-party preferred of 51 to 49 to Labor, and then Essential has 48-46 for Labor with 6% undecided. So overall, Labor's lead on the coalition has tightened a little as election day has gotten closer.
Right, so is Labor going into today's election as a firm favourite?
Absolutely. When we look at that two-party preferred, it does suggest that Labor would form government, but those numbers for two-party preferred are calculated with a lot of assumptions about who people are preferencing, second, third, and on and on. So when we look at the split of the primary vote for Ipsos, that's Labor at 34%, Coalition 33%, Greens 12%, and then others being independents or minor parties like One Nation. They're at 15%, and then another 5 as just don't know. So we can see similar splits like that in news poll. What it means is those Greens, independents, or other voters, they could flow their preferences in unexpected ways to the major parties and change the result in the end.
So neither party have built a primary vote big enough to suggest that they'll be able to form government.
That's right. So it's looking likely that both parties won't have enough seats to form government on their own, so they'll have to cut deals to be able to get the required seats. So it is crucial tonight to keep an eye on those seats where the coalition has independent and Greens contesting them, as well as, of course, Labor.
And after the polls failed to predict the Morrison's government win last time around, it's understandable that we might be hesitant to trust them.
Absolutely.
Yes, an inquiry into the performance of the polls in 2020 found that the errors were not a result of a last-minute shift in voter sentiment or an impact of so-called shy conservatives. Most likely, the reason was because the samples were unrepresentative. It said the polls were skewed towards the more politically engaged voters, which over-preferenced Labor in all the polls. This was unusual because all but one of the 27 final polls from 2007 to 2016 called the results actually correctly.
So what we can do is look at the seats in the contest this time around and try and track each major party's path to victory. So when we're looking at the polls at the moment, Labor are in the lead when it comes to the two-party preferred. So at the moment, they hold 68 seats in the government. They need to get to 75 seats, so they need to win 7 seats in this election. They will be targeting Pearce, Swan, Boothby, Chisholm and Reid. They're 5 that they really do think that they can swing. If they get those 5, there is still a chance that they can form a minority government because they have Adam Bant, which will most likely win the seat of Melbourne. And they also have independent Andrew Wilkie in Tasmania, who will win and most likely throw his support behind the Labor government or Labor Party. And so they will be able to get that 75 seats and form government. They are, though, wanting to form a majority. So they're targeting 13 seats, which would give them a comfortable majority of 82. Obviously, they don't think they're going to win 13 seats. The Liberal Party don't, Labor don't. No one thinks that they can win that many, but all they need to do is win 7. So if they can win the 7 seats, they'll be able to get their majority in their own right, and they've got a chance at that. Now, the path for the coalition's a bit more difficult.
It's very difficult, that path.
They have 75 seats in the current election. They have to hold every single one of them, all right? That's pretty difficult when you look at some of the polling numbers at the moment, especially with the independents that are challenging some of the moderate Liberals in Kooyong, Chisholm, Goldstein and so forth. And they also then have to probably get some more off Labor and swing a few back.
Yeah.
They are targeting a few. They're targeting like Gilmore, Corangamite, McEwen, Hunter, which is had a retiring Labor MP, and Hughes, which is Craig Kelly, who's now the leader of the United Australia Party. That's his old seat. They believe they can take that seat back from him. If they get any of these seats, it means that Labor has to win 1 more on top of that 7. So they have to go to 7, 8. So it does make it a bit difficult for Labor, but that means that the coalition aren't losing any of their seats at all, which is a real big if they can do that. And also, if Labor can't get those 73 seats that they want, it still opens the door for the coalition because they've got independents like Bob Katter and Helen Haynes who will most likely throw the support if it's a hung parliament. Zali Steggall, she said that she will support the Liberal government if and it's a big if, Morrison steps down. So she wants Morrison to be gone.
Yeah.
And Rebecca Sharkey, who's the MP for Mayo, has indicated she's likely to throw her support as well behind them. So there's a lot to play up for. There's multiple paths to victory for both parties. And even today, it's still really difficult to see which way it's going to be swinging or who's going to be coming out on top at the end of tonight.
Yeah, and we're going to keep our eyes very close on Twitter, very close on the AEC's coverage. As soon as the polls close at about 6 o'clock, we will be hopefully getting some results in straight away. But first, let's take a look around the country at some other battleground seats to watch tonight. Tom, what do we mean by a marginal or like a battleground seat?
Yeah, so when we talk about marginal seats, we're referring to seats that were won by a small margin in the last election, or they now have a small margin due to redistributing. So some seats are extremely unlikely to swing to the other side. So for example, the seat of Melbourne is currently held by Adam Bant, the leader of the Greens. He won the seat in 2019 by a margin of 21.8%, which is a thumping and has held that since 2010. Yeah. So it's going to take a monumental shift, an unprecedented shift for him to lose that seat. It's not going to happen tonight. Adam Bant will regain the seat of Greens. I'm happy to say it right now. However, take the electorate of Bass in Tasmania, which was won by Bridget Archer for the Liberal Party in the 2019 election. Archer won that seat by a margin of 0.4%, which translates to just 563 votes. And so after 70,000 votes were counted, just over 550 votes separated the candidates. So this is what we mean by marginal, because the lead held by Archer is so small, it wouldn't take much for the seat to swing to another party. 550 votes, not much in the swing of an election, especially with 70,000 votes.
Absolutely not. Let's now take a look at Chisholm. That's the first one that comes to mind for me in Victoria's southeastern suburbs. The division includes suburbs like Box Hill, Chadstone, Oakley, Glen Waverley, and this year there's 12 candidates running. Now, Liberal MP Gladys Liu leads the seat with just a margin of 0.5%. It's one of the 15 seats the coalition holds from 2015. Now, you might remember that after the election, Gladys Liu was taken to the federal court for these Chinese language signs that instructed the voters in AEC purple how to vote signage in Chinese, saying how to vote, put 1 next to Liberal. Independent candidate from Kooyong, Oliver Yates, was furious about this and drove a big movement to take her to the federal court. And the Liberals then actually admitted that they did intend to sort of coerce voters, but the main problem was just the colour of the signage looking like the purple AEC material rather than the traditional Liberal blue by the coalition.
Yeah, so they said that the issue was that when you translate between Chinese to English, the meaning could be lost. So it intended to say, to make sure your vote counts, put a 1 next to the Liberal Party candidate. Gladys Liu won by such a tiny margin the seat in the seat last election that it's definitely going to be one that we're going to have to watch tonight to see if there is that swing on there. And if the polls are right around the country, then Chisholm might change.
No, and have they held that seat before?
Yeah, so they held it from 1998 to 2016. It was Labor. And so before that, it then swung to the coalition. After that, it swung to the coalition in the 2016 election. Now this year, Labor has a very strong candidate for Chisholm in Karina Garland, who is the former Assistant Secretary for the Trades Hall. She worked for the National Union for Workers, and childcare and cost of living are the biggest issues in that electorate. So she is really pressing down on those issues and really pushing that to the electorate to make sure that they know that she's going to stand up for those issues for her. Now, it's going to be really interesting to see how Labor's comprehensive childcare policy will affect voters in that electorate, as well as their plan to increase the minimum wage due to inflation. Now, funnily enough, Gladys Liu last election got into a bit of trouble for her use of WeChat, which is a Chinese-based social media platform. And she's decided this year that she wasn't going to use it. She was going to boycott it for this election. However, Karina Garland, who is the Labor candidate, has been using it this election to run attack ads against the coalition and against Liu. Now, this platform is used by more than 60% of the Mandarin speakers in Australia, and they rely on WeChat for their news. So it's important to note that while Liu is officially off this platform for this election. She does have some prominent supporters who have been pictured with her at multiple events, posting about her record and posting fake news about the Labor Party. Now, one of these prominent supporters is Michelle Zhang, and she was photographed at a party event with Lou. And she has been posting some fake news stories in December about Dan Andrews being tried for treason and facing the death penalty.
Okay.
So even though Lou has kept off the platform herself, she still has a strong presence on there thanks to some of her very loyal supporters.
Great. Let's now take a look at Macquarie. So Macquarie leads New South Wales for its most marginal seat. With a margin of 0.2%. It's near the Blue Mountains and it's currently held by the Labor Party with a very small margin. Sam, what else do we have about Macquarie?
Well, the thing about Macquarie to keep in mind is that it is a very politically divided electorate. You have the single road running through the mountains, which at almost all polling stations at the last election was majority Labor, and then you've got the Richmond area north of the mountains, where it's almost all polling stations majority Liberal. And of course, when you're at that Richmond area, that's pushing towards the Hills district where Scott Morrison's originally from, and that district over there is some of the strongest Liberal margins in the country. So in terms of, just because of the way that the electorate is divided geographically, it is also divided politically, and so that gives it its really tight margin and means it'll be a very interesting contest.
Cool.
Now, this seat has swung back and forth between the two major parties for decades. The incumbent is Labor's Susan Templeman, and she will be campaigning strongly on the response to the 3 natural disasters since 2019, which was the 2020 Black Summer bushfires and the 2 recent floods. Now, public anger has been brewing since the fires, and it would not have been helped by the 2 floods either, or the flood recovery assistance by the government, will it?
Now, let's also look at Pearce, which could be interesting this election. In WA, it is the seat that was held by former, what are we calling him? Former or?
Incumbent, but
Retiring incumbent.
Yeah.
Retiring incumbent, former Attorney General Christian Porter. Tell us about that seat, Tom.
Yeah, so Pearce is in the north west of Perth and was held by the former Attorney General Christian Porter, as you said, before he infamously stood down from his role as AG and announced he would not be contesting his seat of Pearce after historical rape allegations surfaced last year. Now, the Liberals have held Pearce since March 1990, and they hold it with a margin of 5.2%, which is quite a large margin. But with the events of the last 18 months and with no incumbent, it's quite possible that the margin for that seat could narrow or could even swing this election.
Unsurprisingly, there's 2 high-profile women running for this seat, and it's clear that the Labor Party are banking on their candidate, former Wanneroo Mayor Tracy Roberts, to help gain ground for the Liberal Party.
And the Liberals are running with Linda Aiken, who is a nurse and has lived in the electorate for over 4 decades.
I'd say Labor is just banking on the seat hopefully being really angry towards the Liberal Party and towards Christian Porter for what has gone on with, the rape allegations plus all the other things in Canberra. And then I'd say by putting a woman in the, running against her to replace Christian Porter, it's also following the same line, trying to play off the woman thing, trying to appeal to that sort of anger within the electorate of Pearce.
Both parties definitely are trying to show that electorate that they are respectful of women, respectful of women in the workplace, and that they really do have listened to what's happened in the last few years and are really trying to work on how they treat women in their workplace.
Absolutely. Now we're going to take a look at preferential voting, which people can find very confusing. We've got all of our, we couldn't get any ballot papers obviously, but you'll know if you voted today that you get all of these how to vote cards. Now, this is where the parties will list their own preferences and how they would like you to vote. And Chantel Hayden has prepared a package to explain how preferential voting actually works.
So you've just voted, or you're about to, and you've just got one important question. What exactly is preferential voting? I mean, I know that's probably not the question you're asking, but that is the question that I'm going to answer for you today. Preferential voting is a system of ranking your votes based on your preference of candidates. Our votes don't get tallied in the same way as, say, voting in America or the United Kingdom. So when you go to a voting booth, you might notice that the ballot paper is asking you to rank your votes from 1 to however many candidates there are. After voting closes, the votes are counted, with every voter's first preference being tallied. If no candidate receives 50% of the votes, they will look at the candidates that have received the least amount of votes, and then take their second preference and add them to the remaining candidates. If no candidate still has reached 50% of the vote, they will repeat the process until one candidate has finally passed the 50% threshold to claim victory. For example, let's say there are 4 candidates for the seat of Federation. After everyone's first preferences are counted, the results are as follows. Greens on 24%, Labour on 36%, Liberal on 22%, and Independents on 18%. No candidate here has received 50%, so the candidates that have received the least, which in this case are the Independents, are eliminated, and those preferences of those votes are distributed. After they're distributed, no candidate has 50%. So we go again. And this time, we're taking the preference from the Liberal candidate. As you can see, after this round, Labour has received 60% of the votes, meaning they have passed the 50% threshold and can claim the seat of Federation. This is how preferential voting works.
Let's check back in now with our data studio.
Cool. Welcome back to RMIT's state-of-the-art data studio. How good is this? What we're going to do before we get some results is we're going to look at the state of play at the moment. So on our magic virtual screen right here, we have the state of play, and this is how we voted at the last election. So as you can see, 77 seats to the Liberal Party. They're just hanging on to that majority there. By-elections have eroded that just a little bit. ALP, Labor, getting 68. And then we've got, so you can see kind of on the bottom row there, you've got the Greens, the Katter Party, you've got the Centre Alliance, and then 3 independents. And they like to keep things fun. They keep things loose. But now what we're going to do is we're going to look at what seats are going to really matter tonight and where's going to make an impact. So we're starting with Wentworth. Now, we're going through kind of the seats where the Teal candidates are running here. Wentworth, of course, is Allegra Spender. She's made headlines, and you can see it's very close. They had a previous attempt there. Karen Phelps ran at the 2019 election, and she was actually successful, but then a by-election reversed that. So they're hoping to win back that seat for a larger independent voice in the government. We'll move on. Our next seat is Boothby. Boothby is where Jo Dye is running. You know that name from Four Corners last year. She's a friend of Kate, who disclosed allegations about Christian Porter that ultimately led to his resignation this year. So that will definitely be one to watch as well. A very passionate candidate there. Indy is our next seat that we'll look at, and that's where Helen Haynes, she won it last time. So this is a seat that independents are really looking to hold on to, again, to maintain that voice and that really active crossbench. Casey, we're now going to Tasmania, very south here. We've got a new Teal candidate called Claire Ferris-Miles, and she's really looking to unseat the Liberal Party there, but you can see a very, very safe seat there and a very big hill to climb. We'll move on to Warringah. This was Tony Abbott's old seat. It's not anymore. Zali Segal's there. She's faced very fierce opposition from Catherine Deves. We know all about her. So that'll be an interesting race to watch tonight as well. Now let's move back to Melbourne. Let's keep it local. Goldstein is the next seat. ABC journalist Zoe Daniel is running against Tim Smith in that seat. A lot of passion around that campaign, a lot of grassroots support. Will it be enough to get her over the line? We'll have to see. And our last seat we're looking tonight is Kooyong. Kooyong, of course, is Treasurer Josh Frydenberg's seat. And Monique Ryan, she's a doctor. She's now turned a political candidate at Teal, really campaigning for climate action. Will she unseat the Treasurer? That'll be a history-making moment if it happens. And when it does, you'll hear about it here. Back to you, Jackie and Tom.
Thank you very much, Lachlan. So at the last election, 1.5 million people on the electoral failed to vote. This was one of the lowest voter turnouts in Australian history. Most of these gaps were found in inner city electorates, which have high proportions of young people. There is no doubt that young Australians are disengaged with federal politics. But what will happen this year, Tom?
Well, this year over 17 million Australians are enrolled, and according to the Australian Electoral Commission, around 440,000 new Australian citizens will cast a vote for their very first time this federal election. Some are migrants who have newly become citizens, and there are around 416,000 new voters who are 18 and 19 years of old. The AEC has also reported that over 550,000 eligible Australians are not enrolled for this year's election though.
So our reporters Sarah Liversidge and Rachel Jackson took a closer look at what young people want this time around.
We've got 3 minutes.
Australia's compulsory voting system. Yet among all the noise of gaffes and gotcha questions, young people can feel left out of the political discussion. In polls conducted recently by The Age and Sydney Morning Herald, rising cost of living, climate change and healthcare were the three most important issues for 18 to 34-year-olds. These views were echoed in the first-time voters we spoke to in Melbourne.
Some of the most important issues to me are climate change, purely because, you know, we're going to be the people who are left with it to deal with the problem. House prices.
I'm a university student at the moment, so tertiary education and especially affordability is probably a big thing for me.
Probably more action on climate change, thinking about more affordable living, cost of living, things like the pay gap.
The housing issue and how expensive it is has just gone out of control, and now I sort of get the sense of dread that the exact same thing is starting to happen with food and with rent and with cars.
Perhaps surprisingly, these young voters weren't so keen on getting political information from social media.
I get most of my political information from podcasts and also reputable media.
Reliable articles and reliable sources of information.
Do you get much information from social media?
No information from social media, because all the information on social media, especially ones that pop up in my feed, are just garbage.
How are you feeling about voting for the first time?
I'm excited to go on my own and figure it all out.
I'm feeling fairly confident to vote. With the small amount of research I've done, I have a good idea of which parties that I do resonate with most.
It's good to have the chance to vote and sort of voice my opinion on the paper in that aspect, but I don't know if it's actually going to do that much. Yeah.
I'll get a real buzz out of it. 99% of human history has not enjoyed the power we hold through our vote. So just don't knock it, you know, it's incredibly important.
In the 2019 federal election, Australian election study data found 44% of 18 to 24-year-olds voted Labor, 37% voted Greens, and just 15% voted for the Liberal Party. So have these young voters made up their minds yet?
Yeah. I've known maybe since the start of March who I'm going to vote for.
So far as currently Greens. Greens, in the grand scheme of things, kind of fulfills all of the objectives that I hope to see in our future.
Kind of. I know the way I'm leaning, that's for sure. Yeah.
I'll vote Labor. I know. Yeah, Dad just heard that and he's very happy.
This has been Rachel Jackson and Sarah Liversidge for RMIT election coverage.
Thanks very much for that, Sarah. Now, the polls are closed. It is 6 p.m. And just before we get to the next passage, Sam, you have a bit to say when the polls closing?
Just to watch out over the next couple of hours, because those results will start coming in. We've got, I'll be into the mainframe trying to find out as many results as we can, and we'll try and bring them to you as rapidly as possible with some hot analysis.
Brilliant. Now, Jackie, last week you went and chatted to some students from uni, is that correct?
I did. I was down there on Bowen Street at RMIT University, and we found a big range of people. Well, some people knew absolutely nothing about elections, and some people were very well prepared. So let's take a look at that now. We're here on Bowen Street at RMIT to find out what young voters think of this election. First time voting?
Yes, so.
Yeah? Yeah, first time voting.
It is, yeah. So I am 20, didn't get to just miss out on the last election. So I'm reasonably excited, but also filled with a little bit of dread, because if it doesn't go my way, I'd be pretty sad.
So do you know who you're going to vote for?
Labor.
Labor?
Yeah.
Labor.
I have no idea.
Probably Liberal.
I have my parents
Liberal.
do. What are you talking about?
Mate, which one's
Why
ScoMo?
are you...
I'll probably be voting Greens.
Yeah.
I'll be voting for the Greens.
Yes.
I think I'm going to vote Greens with Labor as my second option.
Yeah, I'm not voting for the election at all. I don't like the Liberals, but I prefer the Labor Party, but I don't also agree with whatever they decide.
But we have Alex Dyson as an independent. People probably know him as an ex-Triple J host. He used to host with Matt Olkine. His policies really speak to me, and we have one Green senator that's running as well, so they're probably the two I'd go for.
Undecided, but I'm leaning a bit more towards the Greens right now.
I don't know.
You don't? Do you care?
I mean, I should. A bitch has been to Canberra 3 times and I don't know anything about Parliament, so...
Because I believe in what they want to do. It's very good in the future for the workers.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I'm the same as you, brother.
What about you, buddy?
Probably just from the family, you know.
General
Comes down,
family, yeah.
Follows everyone like a sheep.
I haven't been keeping up, shamefully, with a lot of policy side of things this election, but that's usually all my mates vote for that, my parents vote for that. I'm obviously not happy, or not stoked with the current state of things, but I'm not well versed enough to tell you exactly why. Just I'm kind of following all my mates, the majority of my kind of demographic.
After what I've seen, like a lot of what they stand for align with my beliefs. So out of all the parties, that's like who I'm leaning towards more.
Yeah, I think that's what I've sort of come to. I'm still doing research and still like looking up pros and cons, but I think that's how it's going to go.
You're going to go on the day and just put numbers?
Yeah, I would rely on my parents, honestly. You know, hopefully, and my friends, see what they all say, what to do, but, you know, I really don't know anything.
You decide, when will you make up your mind?
Probably closer to election day, maybe literally the week of.
Do it on the day.
Yeah.
No, I'll do it before. Labor.
Okay.
Whatever my parents decide. You too,
Okay,
mate.
so your parents will tell you on the day?
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, I've been seeing like more content on TikTok and stuff. Like they're really pushing it, especially United Australia. But yeah, I reckon closer to the day I'll be 100%.
Yeah, and why not one of the major parties?
I'm not sure. Like Labor, maybe I'd vote for them second because I agree with a few of their policies, but I think a few are still like behind. Whereas Greens is more very progressive. Yeah.
The two major parties don't really speak to my interests. I kind of see a Labor as a lesser evil than the Liberals. As much as they say they're not working together, they still benefit the same things, unfortunately. Unfortunately, I probably will have to put Labor as my third vote because, like I said, they're the lesser of two evils. It's either that or One Nation, and I don't want them anywhere near the top of my ballots.
Climate action is my main priority for this election.
Is there one election issue that you know about?
Yeah, he's not fighting for what's called healthy environment. He's not doing anything for the environment.
I don't think the debate last night was great for anyone to watch. I think that I'm hoping Labor will get in primarily, but I'll be hoping that Greens get enough votes to have at least some input. So that's why I'm voting.
Good question. Is Ballarat an electorate? Do you know?
Oh, it's pretty hard with my electorate because I'm originally from rural Victoria. So...
I know it starts with a J. I actually forgot.
That's fine.
I'm in Melbourne, so I've got Adam Band in my seat, so I'll be voting for Adam Band.
And why?
Which one's which?
So ScoMo is the current Prime Minister?
No, we know that. You know
And
that.
What, Scott Morrison?
Yeah.
Oh, why did she say ScoMo? Is that his nickname?
So other than our great friend in his red jacket who's been to Canberra 3 times there, we could see that a lot of people, a lot of young people, were voting for the Greens, who are very pro-climate.
Yeah, I was a bit surprised by that. I didn't expect that many people to be voting for the Greens or wanting to vote for the Greens, but I guess that's the shift that we're seeing, isn't that right, Sam?
Yeah, but I think the other thing to sort of really take from those interviews there is that, of course, we saw a major wave of voting registrations from young people, which generally you would assume to be progressive, but not always the case. A lot of people don't sort of have different opinions on who they're going to vote for, or like some of the people in those interviews, they're relying on their parents or friends to tell them how to vote. So it's not always a fait accompli that they're going to vote progressive.
Yeah. Now, one of the year's biggest election issues is climate change, and this is how the government plans to approach the issue.
I reckon the Nationals' inability to support a strong net zero policy could have an impact in their seat of Page. It's one of the worst flood-affected electorates in the nation. I'm assuming they're very angry and quite enlightened to climate change issues now. So there is an independent running against Kevin Hogan, who holds the seat with 95%, but we'll definitely take a look at that. Now we are crossing to Sarah Besky now, who is doing a live cross for us.
Brilliant.
Everyone, how you going?
Good, how are you?
Hi, how you going?
Yeah, pretty good. Bit anxious.
Are you? Yeah. Are you just at home?
Yes.
Lovely.
Yes. Watching the votes roll in, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, obviously climate change has taken a frontline issue for this election. So how is it dictating where people are voting? What do you think? Why is it such a big issue?
Well, you know, I mean, it's funny, isn't it? Because I think on the one hand, you just heard those interviews with the students. You know, climate change is a huge, impact. There's a huge issue amongst young people, but across the board. I mean, there was a recent poll that went out to all Australians, and 90% of Australians actually have care and are worried about climate change. Now, it's very rare to get consensus like that on an issue in Australia, and I think that's very broad consensus on something that people are really, really worried about. And yet, how much have we heard about climate change and the environment in general as a sort of election topic? I'd say very little. It was only just last week that the Labor Party announced their policies on biodiversity and the environment. And I think climate change has had a very sort of absent role actually in election commentary. So, and yet I think, people have just recently lived through the floods in northern New South Wales and Queensland. People have not forgotten the extreme trauma of the 2019 Black Summer fires. I do believe that people are recognising that this issue is actually going to be an impact to our everyday lives, and we need to do something about it.
Exactly, yeah. So we've seen at this election, at least, the rise of Climate 200, the rise of the Greens. Obviously, climate change is a big issue with voters, but as you said, we haven't heard much about what the policies are of the two major parties who are running. So can you give us your thoughts on what the two major parties are presenting at this election for their policies towards climate change?
Absolutely. When it comes to the coalition, essentially there have been no new promises this election campaign and very little kind of commentary really on climate change. So looking at I think there are two things you can analyse really with the coalition. One is their budget documents and what they're committing to, but they've been in charge of the place for 9 years, so you can actually look at their record. And to be honest, that speaks more than anything, doesn't it? Mm. And when you look at their record, essentially, they're a global embarrassment. I mean, they've actually stood up in global fora and been laughed at because their policies are, they're archaic in terms of recognising the problem and actually trying to tackle it. They're still heavily in the pocket of gas and fuel and coal industries. Their policies are still extremely supportive of subsidising those industries. And, and their commitments are to having, net zero by 2050, but relying extremely heavily on, uninvented technology, which is carbon capture, digging carbon into the soil, basically, which, it doesn't exist. It's not a technology that actually exists, and experts really doubt that it ever will. Their policies are consistent with global warming of 3 to 4 degrees this century, which perhaps it doesn't sound much to people, but let me tell you, it's not going to be a planet that any of us are going to want to exist on. The Great Barrier Reef will be functionally extinct. Black summer will feel like a really cool, summer.
Yeah.
It's going to be pretty much uninhabitable for most of us. So not a future that I think anyone wants.
Yeah, and what about the Labor policies? What do you think of those?
Yeah, sure. Okay, well, look, more ambitious, definitely. They're going for a 43% cut in emissions by 2030, so a slightly shorter time frame, which is obviously a stronger commitment. And lots of really interesting kind of sub-commitments, things like building community solar battery programs to support solar panels on rooftops. And that's something the Australians have really gotten on board with. There are more solar panels on our rooftops than any other country in the world. So it's great they're really supporting that. They're really keen on jobs in the renewable energy sector, which is a great step forward. But, experts rank it as a good start, really not sort of exactly what we need. It's still going to lead to about a 2-degree warming in the planet, which is still going to be catastrophic to our natural systems and to the habitability of the planet. So let's just hope, this is my hope, that that ambition was kind of, really to win people over. Let's just hope that the Labor Party have actually, if they get in power tonight, that they actually start tomorrow with a sort of, and consider what it actually is going to take to make sure that this planet remains habitable and actually commit to those kinds of policies. I personally am more confident that the Labor Party is capable of making that adjustment and thinking more about the future than the current coalition, who are, in my mind, sort of belligerently ideological when it comes to rejecting, they've only just recently accepted the science of climate change.
Yes, yes.
Matt Canavan still continues to say that climate change isn't real.
Yeah. Says that net zero is dead in the water, he says. Thank you very, very much, Sarah Vesky. It's been wonderful having you on.
My pleasure. And let's cross fingers for tonight, hey?
Yes, fingers crossed for tonight. Now, another big discussion in the election campaign that is of huge importance to a lot of Australians is the government's treatment of the LGBTQIA community.
That's right, Jackie. So the LGBTQIA plus community is again having to go through this election, hearing how the government will treat their community and how they will protect them as well. They've just announced, the coalition at least, has announced that they'll be introducing the religious discrimination bill back in if they're re-elected without protections that were put through before the election. And the Labor Party has said that they too will bring in this religious discrimination bill. However, there will be protections against LGBTQIA plus people, which is much more reassuring than the coalition's policies.
Yeah. And some of the people that will be affected by this bill if the government wins re-election will be LGBTQI churchgoers. LGBTQI advocate Kian is here on the panel, and he was kicked out of his church after coming out. So he's here today. What are your thoughts on the impact of the bill?
Hi, thank you for having me. I think the bill, if the Liberals win and the coalition wins tonight, will have a huge impact on queer kids, especially accessing education. Whether we like to or not, private schools are seen in Australia as being better education for kids. And so inherently this bill, if the coalition wins and they put it through, will hold education for queer kids to access higher and better education, so-called, than have been forced to go to public schools because they're being kicked out for their rights. And this will not be the last step that they'll do. This is not the final be end all. You see it around the world where it's like conservatives are doing a slow chip away at queer people's rights. You see it in the UK in trying to do conversion therapy for banning it for LGB, but not for T and trans people. And you see it also in the US. And also the recent talk about Rohingya with Catherine Deves as well. It's just...
Yeah, so let's move to that.
Yeah.
What do you think about this talk? Well, she's actually retracted her apology. She apologised for her transphobic comments.
And then walked back on that apology.
And then took those back. She's actually Scott Morrison's sort of captain's pick too. Apparently the whole campaign is being run out of his office,
I wouldn't be surprised
which he's
by that.
declined. Yes. And what do you think of that? What do you think?
Look, as much as I don't like Scott Morrison, I have to give him props. He's a very political person. He doesn't do anything without politically thinking it through. He's obviously trying to fight for the seats in New South Wales, which in the western suburbs, there's a lot of religious communities, and this bill will go a long way. It will be interesting to see tonight even if Catherine Deves doesn't win Warringah, which I hope she doesn't, how that translates to religious votes voting for the Libs in these seats like Reid, like Fowler, like especially Parramatta, which is where Scott Morrison's been for the past 3 days, 3 times in this election. It's concerning, and he's obviously trying to induce a culture war over trans people, as we've seen in the US. And if this does pick up and this does get traction, we'll see it in state elections coming up. We'll see it in the next federal election, and that's how they're going to whip up votes. And
because there's been talk that he has his support behind Ms Deves and her comments. He doesn't think he's going to win Warringah. He doesn't think the government will win it, but it might get them more seats, say, in more conservative areas of Australia. But then it's also affecting the moderate Liberals. Like, do you think it's going to have an effect in these conservative parts of Australia where they might look at him and vote for his party?
I think, like, obviously it can happen. I know religious communities, coming from someone from the church, I know that him going out to leaders of congregations of different religions saying, we'll bring this back in, we'll do exactly what you want, is him telling different religious communities around Australia that, like, vote for me and do it. And you may not think, oh, there's only X amount of people who go to church or go to a mosque or go to a temple or whatever, but there's so many churches and mosques in different seats. And even if a pastor won't say, vote for Scott Morrison, but they'll make subtle, like, we need a good Christian man to run our country. We need this, that, and the other. So it will, I think he's given up on moderates. I think he's just sort of like, be going with him. I want to get this bill through. And they're holding me back.
And I want to get him voted back in as PM.
I
would have thought that you would, such a contentious issue that has the, ability to impact, really vulnerable people, that you would avoid it like the plague. But he's really put himself right in the middle of it. Do you think I think what they're calling these seats is these peri-urban seats. Where they are like they're on the outer fringes, they're not metropolitan, where he has a huge base.
And I think also, because they tend to be like Labor seats as well, and I think he's trying to move away from these rich city seats like North Sydney, like even Warringah, Kooyong, and move away from it, and so he can put these bills in and not have any pushback from these moderates, which happened this time around when he tried to put it through. He's very much just trying to whip up a culture war over it, like we see in the US. It worked really well over there. It's gotten a lot of people to vote because religious communities vote on these issues. Like, these are like the big issues that they will, it's abortion, it's queer people, and it's religious freedom. And that's what they will vote on. And they will take this to the ballot, and it's concerning, and it'll be interesting tonight to see if that translates. I hope that Australians do better, and I hope religious communities have a sense of compassion in it and won't vote for it. But growing up in the church, I don't have that much hope in what could happen. So
can you give us, I know we've got, not enormous amounts of time, but what was your experience?
Well, I grew up in church. My family's all been in church. My grandparents are pastors. We went to really Pentecostal, what people call evangelical, but it's just called Pentecostal. It's loud with all the drums, and it looks like a club. But we'd go to those, and church was really great. But I knew at a young age that I was gay, and there was a lot of self-hate that came from church. And I grew up when same-sex marriage was being debated. I went to a Christian school, so like this religious discrimination bill, it would be me. Like, I would be affected in that because. And I grew up, and you just get told this is wrong, you're going to hell, and you just emanate so much self-hate. And I know many queer people who grew up in church who, during their teenage years, depression was very high, suicidal thoughts a commonplace, and also self-harm. So Scott Morrison just doesn't care, and he just wants to win. And it just comes down to that, really.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on,
Thank you for having me.
Going to your election party?
Yes, I am.
He's going 7:30. He'll be at his election party.
Having fun, hopefully.
Thank you very much
hopefully
for being
for a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Coming up on the program, we have lots more analysis. Keep going. And all the latest counts as they come in, and we'll be speaking to our reporters around the country as we track this historic election. Stay with us.
What's coming up next? Cost of living. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Enjoy your election party. Hopefully it's a fun one and not a sad one at the end of the night.
Bring us some booze, please.
Across many electorates, the cost of living, inflation and higher interest rates will be impacting how people vote.
Since the last election, Australian household budgets have felt the pinch, with prices surging across the board. We have seen concerted evidence by the federal government to combat this.
You're referring to the support the government gave during this year's budget.
I am. That is what I'm referring to. As we know, the government introduced JobKeeper, the disaster payment, and more recently, the $250 payments to concession card holders. There was also the $450 tax write-offs, but the most recent promise made this week was the option to dip into your superannuation up to $40,000 to help with a deposit for a home loan.
Brilliant, isn't it, on surface value? And do you think this is going to be enough to help those people who are struggling, and will that be able to get them much needed votes?
Well, there's been heaps of opposition to the superannuation promise. Some analysts argue that if people have more money, the price of houses will just go up anyway. And it eats into future wealth, which is really needed for their retirement if they are already socioeconomically disadvantaged. Other cuts like the fuel excise definitely helped. But the 44.2% cut ends in September anyway. Personally, I think the offer to dip into the super was a bit of a bribe coming so late in the election campaign. And I think that people that are really vulnerable and struggling, it's just sort of too good an offer to turn down.
But even with these measures, we are still seeing inflation right across the board, aren't we?
We are. The Reserve Bank has consumer inflation at 5.1%, which is the highest it's been since 1991. Now, the final weeks of the election campaign were flooded with debate over stagnant wages, whether or not raising the minimum wage by $1 would cause the economy to collapse.
And Albanese even resorted to carrying a dollar coin around as a prop for his promise to help wages match up with inflation. He doesn't use props, but he used it for this one.
ScoMo loves props.
ScoMo loves a prop, yeah.
So do you think this will cripple the economy?
Well, look, economists are split on the issue. We have the unions saying that it is necessary for wages to rise, and then we have conservative economists who claim it will lead to greater inflation. The fact of the matter is, if increasing workers' wages from $20 to $21 an hour is going to cripple our economy, then our economy is extremely fragile. Because if this is the case, business people who receive massive pay rises yearly, are they going to turn down their annual pay increase? Because surely that's going to cripple the economy too.
Interesting logic. Very interesting logic. Now,
one of the electorates that's worth looking into is the electorate of Lyons, and it's currently held by the Labor Party. It's one of those two seats that Labor has consistently held in Tasmania, and they really can't afford to lose at this election.
No. So the margin sits at 5.2%, which isn't necessarily, down in the 0.something%. But both national leaders made efforts to visit the electorate right before the election was called. It's a really difficult place to campaign in because it's so diverse, and in growing outer urban areas, like the suburb of Bridgewater, for example, some of them are the most socio-economic disadvantaged areas in the country. This is according to the 2016 census, because we don't have any more information.
Yeah, so Bridgewater is one of those. It's about 20 minutes out of Hobart, and at the last census, the unemployment rate was a whopping 15.2% unemployed.
Which we don't know if it's worse or better now, because we really just don't have the data, which is frustrating.
Yeah.
The median household income is half the national average, and an individual earns about $220 less than your average Australian. This year, the Liberal candidate Susie Bauer is taking on Labor's incumbent Brian Mitchell, who we're going to have a look at his tweets in a little bit, but let's talk about...
You might remember, though, at the last election, the Liberals disendorsed their candidate Jessica Whelan after she made anti-Muslim remarks on social media, which improved Labor's margin in the seat.
But now Labor faces controversy of their own with the sitting member Brian Mitchell. Earlier this month, he was forced to apologise for posting tweets like a decade ago about massaging boobies and gargling balls.
Yeah, here's one of them.
Here's one. Let's get it up on the screen. I will gargle balls for money to buy an iPad 2. There's another. We've got another. Oh.
Yeah, Shifley MP Ed Hossick outlines new benefits of massaging boobies.
He likes the photo of that one.
And finally...
If this debate doesn't wrap up soon, we're going to need mops. Women don't do well holding on.
Yeah.
Really, I love that one.
I think it's important also, before we move on, that these were made over a decade ago. They have surfaced now, but they have called for people who think that he should have been disendorsed by the Labor Party. Now, his main campaign promise is a $15 million commitment to funding the redevelopment of the Royal Flying Doctors Tasmania at Launceston Airport. And do you think this will have any impact?
Well, a large portion of lions suffer from more than 3 chronic illnesses. So out of the 151 electorates nationwide, lions come second for this metric of its electorate having more than 3 chronic illnesses. So you can see why these kinds of promises for healthcare are enticing for voters.
Yeah, so the Liberals have promised over $105 million for lions if they are elected. And this is 8 times more than Labor's promises.
And well, you can see that clearly then Labor are not too concerned about the need to spend in the electorate because lions tends to swing with the mood of the nation anyway.
So Gabe, you've got some more info on this stuff, don't you?
Hey guys, look, I'm not sure how much I can talk about gargling balls in this time slot, but as you've been discussing, cost of living is an issue we're seeing at the centre of the campaign. Unfortunately, there's no simple answer as to why it costs $16 to serve 2 eggs on toast. And similarly, there's no simple answer to describe how inflation works. So let's break it down by comparing real-world numbers on everyday items. Look, according to the ABS, the measure for household inflation, the Consumer Price Index, rose by 2.1% in the first quarter of 2022. Your grocery items were one of the hardest hit, with shoppers seeing extra dollop milk rise by 25% between March 2021 and 2022. The rising cost of healthcare is an issue that's popped up in many seats. One of these is Corangamite, where Labor incumbent Libby Coker has run her re-election campaign on the cost of GP appointments being up 44% in the area under the coalition. Automotive fuel is also one of the most volatile commodities measured by the CPI, with fuel prices rising by nearly 29% since 1980. The coalition's pre-election fuel excise reduction did help, but it still cost Australians 7.1% more to fill up in the first quarter of 2022 compared to last year. And look, finding the roof in house prices is another issue, with the coalition's plans to allow first home buyers to access their super to make deposits expected to see withdrawals of almost $5 billion from accounts. What we do know though is that house prices rose by 23.7% over 2021. Look, here we've got the rise in house prices in 8 major cities, with Sydney, Hobart and Melbourne topping the list over a 10-year period, according to the residential property price indexes. And look, something close to my heart, and perhaps the most important commodity, that brown, sultry liquid of the gods, coffee. Some economists have told us that we'll be paying $7 for a coffee by the end of the year. But look, that remains to be seen. What we do know, though, is the beans in your latte have risen 14.8% since last year, costing $31 a kilo compared to $27 a kilo. And look, with that in mind, while the idea of $7 coffees would make a great horror movie, what we do know is the cost of living will be a hot political issue for the next government and into the future. Tom, Jackie?
To top off our first hour of programming, we have a very, very special segment planned. This is Tom Trawl's Twitter.
Over the last 6 weeks, and the last 3 years for that matter, I have been trawling through Twitter, finding the best of what Australian politics has to offer. Now, during the Liberal Party's campaign launch, Prime Minister Scott Morrison spoke about his need to change, for him to be a more consensus leader, and that his days of being a bulldozer are behind him. Fast forward to Wednesday, Morrison was at a soccer club in Tasmania, joining in with the junior team's soccer training when he crashes into a child and bulldozes him to the ground. It was a great attempt at rebranding, one that lasted all of 3 days. Now, one man also that has been successfully rebranded himself.
We wanted to see him bulldoze, but that's okay.
That's all right.
We know, we've all seen it. Boom.
Cut of the child. One man that has been successfully rebranding himself as a hopeless romantic is National Senator Matt Canavan. Canavan, who went on record a few weeks ago saying that net zero was dead, posted a beautiful and heartfelt picture with his wife at the entrance to the Oakey Creek coal mine, sharing with his legions of followers that he has taken his wife around central Queensland on a trip that nature lovers would dream about, taking her to 17 coal mines over 4 days. And they say romance is dead. Now, we all need a little bit of self-love, a bit of time to pamper ourselves and to treat ourselves to a nice dinner or a hot bath with a nice face mask. For Tim Wilson, his way of giving himself self-love is by commenting and sharing his own tweets. Congratulated himself. Well, we all have times where we are proud of our work. But if you want to pat yourself on the back, Tim, on Twitter, make sure you have changed to your private account, please. And now, campaigning can be hard, and managing volunteers for your campaign can be very tricky. And Liberal candidate for Warringah, Catherine Deeves, experienced this early into her campaign. I understand it's difficult to manage volunteers, but surely you can get your volunteers in the same shirts, or at least know the lines for the chant. To be fair, the video that we were going to show is very on brand with how Catherine Deeves' campaign has gone.
They say, Catherine Deeves, and then none of them say anything.
No one joins along.
No.
Now, along with being the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison is also a bit of a social media foodie. He loves to share his lavish creations, even when the average household is struggling to buy groceries because the supermarkets are not stocked. However, as we have all learnt from MasterChef and My Kitchen Rules, the most important part of any meal is making sure it is cooked, especially before you post it onto your Twitter. But hey, I'm no Gordon Ramsay, so maybe this is how the meal is supposed to be made. But if this strong curry resembles his strong economy, I'm sure it explains why it's been a sickening ride for us in the last 3 years. Now, whilst the last 6 weeks have seemed like an eternity on Twitter, I'm sure the next 3 years, no matter which party forms government, will be as wild or even wilder ride. Now, you're watching RMIT's coverage of the election. Coming up, we have lots more analysis and all the latest counts as they come in. And we'll be speaking to our reporters around the country as we track this historic election. We're going to head to a short break now. We'll see you in a few minutes.
Welcome back. And now, as we said at the top of the show, 30% postal and pre-postal votes had already been taken before the polls closed today. So what they're actually doing in the AEC this year is from 4 p.m. they were going to be opening those postal votes. They're not going to count them. You're not allowed to count until 6 p.m. But they were opening them in order to be prepared, because there's actually staff shortages at the AEC, as we've seen across the board. Coming across, up across the next hour, we're looking at data work, checking in with our live crosses, looking at independence, talking about hung parliaments, talking about national security. But let's cross to Studio B, do you think?
Yeah, let's.
Yeah.
There we go. Thank you so much. We have our first results. This is amazing. This is just in, hot off the press. We have our journalists out there. They are working incredibly hard to get these as quickly to you as possible. So here are the numbers from being in the ACT, the nation's capital. So there we can see David Smith from the Labor Party. He's out in front. He's got 66% of the vote. But here's the thing about results this early in the night. What you're seeing there is 302 votes, and 37 of those were informal. So not a lot to go off of there. Really, you can't read into that. So we're going to come back and have some even more results for you. We've got our journalists working very hard out there, fueled by Pepsi Max and Diet Coke. So while we wait for more results, we've got some time to fill. And so let's look at the strongholds of all of the parties, all the leaders. We're going to start right here in Melbourne, homegrown. That's where Adam Bandt, he owns this city, he runs it. He's the leader of the Greens, and look at that result right there. It's going to take a lot to unseat him tonight. It's not likely to happen. So we'll move to Grayndler. That's where Albo is. His seat is in New South Wales. Again, a Labor stronghold. We can see those numbers there. He's very strong. So Albo's probably safe tonight as well. Now, there's been a bit said about Cook. Cook's also in New South Wales. We've got very Sydney-centric leaders this time around. There are some outside challenges this time, but again, is it likely? Probably not. ScoMo is safe, but now, here's where the drama is. We're going to go to Hughes. Now, that's where Craig Kelly is. He's the leader of the United Australia Party. It's all about freedom, freedom, freedom. But the thing is, he has defected from the Liberal Party, so that really strong result there, they weren't voting for Clive Palmer, they weren't voting for freedom, they were voting for Craig Kelly. Now he's defected. Is he going to be able to maintain his own support, really staking out on his own? I don't know. We'll have to see, because this is really, it's an evolving situation. Lastly, we'll look at two ministers who may be in trouble. Here's Josh Frydenberg again in Kooyong running against Dr. Monique Ryan. This one's going to come down to the wire. We had a challenger last time who didn't quite get across the line, but Monique Ryan, if we unseat the Treasurer tonight, that could be really history-making stuff. And his assistant in Deakin, Michael Sukar, if we can go to him. He is also potentially at risk tonight. So next up, we'll have even more results. We're now live and the numbers are coming in thick and fast. We're going to cross back to Studio A.
Now, let's cross live to Georgie and Casey. Now, Casey is Tony Smith's seat. He was the Speaker of the House until the Parliament sort of shut down before campaigning begun. So yes, Georgie, are you there?
Hi, yes.
Hi. How are you going?
I'm good. I'm live from Claire Ferris Miles' election party in Upwey in the seat of Casey. It is very lively here, as you can probably hear behind me. So yeah, as you said, Tony Smith was the Liberal candidate for Casey, and he's actually held the seat since 2001, which is my entire lifetime. So it is a very long time. But yeah, things are sort of being shaken up around here a little bit with Claire as the independent. And yeah, it'll be very interesting to see what happens.
Definitely. Can you show us what's going on around in the room?
Yeah, I can. So
who have we got there?
So here is everyone behind me.
Lovely.
If you would like, feel free to wave.
You're on TV. Have you got us up on the screen in there, or they don't care?
currently watching the ABC, but
Oh, okay.
maybe we'll switch it a little bit later.
Switch it over.
I
Yeah.
did hear they're going to change to us a bit later in the night.
Oh, they are.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
right. Yes.
And so so we've got Tony Smith is obviously retiring at the end of this election.
Yes.
Who are the candidates that are running in this seat then, Casey?
Yes, so Aaron Violi is the new Liberal candidate. He is our local. He's lived here his whole life. His family has lived here. I believe he's a third generation Casey candidate, which is pretty impressive. And then we, as I said, we have Claire Ferris-Miles as an independent. Bill Brindle is the Labor candidate. And all up there are 12 different candidates from a range of different parties. So yeah, it is very broad around here.
So a lot of people are trying to win this seat then off of Tony Jones.
Tony Jones, Tony Smith.
Tony Smith, sorry, Tony Jones is not running for office at the moment.
We'd love if he did.
Well, yeah.
Would be interesting.
Yeah.
And so what is Claire Ferris-Mills' chances today of winning?
Yeah, well, it will be quite interesting to watch. At the last election, Liberal won by 4.6%, making the seat marginal, and the Liberal Party have held it since the 80s. But now that we are a marginal seat in Casey, it will be quite interesting to see what happens. I think that Claire has given an option to a lot of people who have been rusted on supporters of either the Liberal or the Labor, as we've seen in so many other seats with independents.
Yeah.
When in my speaking to other people, and even here tonight, the people that are voting for Claire are from a huge array of different places in society, different ages. If they voted before, they have voted all ways before. So I think it will be quite interesting to see whether, her chance of winning. I think this seat is definitely up in there. I mean, we are a marginal seat now, and there are a lot of safe Liberal seats, and we aren't one of them. So I think it will be quite interesting to see who wins. And it's sort of anyone's game.
Yeah. So she's not Climate 200, is she? What's her background? Like, who is she? She's funding donations? Is she?
Yeah. So Claire is the former CEO of Sustainability Victoria. She also has worked in engineering, and so she's a completely an independent, and she not a part of the Climate 200, but is campaigning on sort of the topics and policies around climate change, being former Sustainability Victoria. Obviously, that is a huge one of her focuses, as well as the federal ICAT, which is also very important to her as well. So I think that those two are the main sort of two areas of focus for her and her campaign.
So two very topical issues. So the mood
Absolutely.
there at the moment are they expecting a win tonight? Like, what's the mood feeling like quickly?
Yeah, well, it is pretty early on. Claire actually just arrived as I was going to air, so I haven't had a chance to speak to her. I think everyone here is very positive. They did have a very positive outlookers coming back from the polling booths and said that they had a really good reception, and lots of people talking to them, lots of people interested in taking their how to vote cards. So yeah, I think it will be incredibly interesting. And if I cross to you later in the night, I'll definitely try and give you an update on sort of the mood and what everyone's sort of saying.
Grab Claire and get her on for us. We'll just want to have a talk to Claire. Thank you very, very much, Georgie.
Absolutely.
We will check in with you soon.
Yeah, very interesting to see what happens in Casey.
Very interesting. Now, one independent that's been in the limelight is Monique Ryan, who's running for the Federal Treasurer Josh Frydenberg's seat of Kooyong. Natalie Anderson joins us from Kooyong. Natalie, how are you going? Oh, we don't have her. No, okay. We don't have her.
We don't have Natalie?
No, okay. Well, let's talk. We can talk about the independents.
Well, firstly, who is Monique Ryan?
Oh, she's a doctor.
She's a doctor. Is
Monique
she
Ryan.
Climate 200 as well?
She's Climate 200.
Yep.
Sam, what have you got about the independents?
The independents, the Climate 200 in particular, there's sort of two main sort of movements. One is Voices Of, which came from Cathy McGowan, who won the seat of Indi a few elections ago. That's now the incumbent Helen Haynes, also an independent. So Indi is actually the first seat in the country to have successive independents in a seat. So that's one movement, but then the other one is Climate 200, which is supported by Simon Holmes-A-Court. But of course, the sort of the independent movement, particularly that teal independent movement, really represents sort of the demise of the moderate Liberal, the moderate faction of the Liberal Party. But then what's interesting is at the same time as that spells trouble for the moderate Liberals, in terms of the conservative part of the Liberal Party, as well as the Nationals, we have a change in population where we're becoming more urbanised, and at the same time we have COVID, so people are moving from the cities because they can work from home and they're having a bit of a tree change or a sea change, and they're taking with them their generally progressive values. So as the population shift and the electoral boundaries shift, so there's more power centred on the cities, where it tends to, certain parts of it can tend to be a bit more progressive. You sort of see this really changing demography of what represents the Liberal and National Party, and that the independent movement is a symptom or a cause, depends how you look at it, but that's really sort of what that shows for us.
Yeah, wow, that's really interesting. So there could be big changes in some seats that we staunch regional seats or suburban seats because of these changes, then you're saying?
Yeah, definitely. Well, and I also think that what we see tonight with the election with the independents will be almost an indicator of what in a couple of elections' time will be an increasing trend. Because this sort of intensification of things like integrity and women's rights and climate change, it's only going to snowball, and as well as, like I said, those sort of shifting in population, the people who are concerned with that are going to have a bit more power in these elections as we go further into the 21st century.
So now, hung parliament, if the independents do start to gain ground, it's not ideal situation for either major party, but the polls are showing that it is increasingly likely with these independents. How will this affect the next government then?
Well, of course, if it's a hung parliament, it will mean that they'll be operating in minority. And the last time we did have that was Julia Gillard in 2010. And, as you said, it's not great for either of the major parties. And they have, of course, been, particularly the coalition, has been spruiking the dangers of having a minority party. But it's good to remember our history and perhaps our geography, that we've had many minority governments. Well, we've had two minority governments federally across Australian history, but we've also had many minority parties at the state level. And then in terms of in the wider world, we have plenty of countries right around the world, like the UK and Germany and Belgium, where they famously spent almost 200 days negotiating a new government. We hope that doesn't happen here.
Scott, I'm going off air tonight. Only on 200 days. So we're going to cross to Studio B to have a deeper look into what are the pros and cons of a hung parliament.
Here we are. I'm going to do 3 sets of results in 30 seconds. So let's see if we can get through. We're going to see Chisholm in just a moment, but first a check-in with Cook. We were talking about leaders earlier, and Scott Morrison, he is in front there. So no unseating a major party leader tonight. It's very unlikely. But if we can take a look at Chisholm right now, that's where Gladys Liu is, and currently she's in front. Okay, she's in there. She's in the top 2. ALP also making some strong signs, but again, that's only from 100 votes. But Gladys Liu, she's in the top 2, so maybe those purple signs last time didn't make that much of a difference. Now, lastly, we'll go to Kennedy. Kennedy there, 2-party preferred. Bob Katter, I'm a Queenslander, he's a Queenslander, and he's definitely got that state locked down. Back to you, Jacqueline.
Thank you, guys. Now, staying on Kooyong, we're going to cross back there to Natalie again, who we had earlier. Very exciting. Natalie, are you there? Hello.
I am here.
Sounds like you're inside now.
I am.
Woohoo!
I was able to get inside the Auburn Hotel. and I've got my little wristband.
Oh, yeah, very good.
And
So what's
it
the
is-
mood like in there? Is she feeling like she's going to take it from the treasurer?
Absolutely, 100%. It is just gorgeous in here this evening. Very loud, very proud, full of pride, and really ready to tackle on the opposition.
Right.
And so what time are we expecting Dr. Ryan to be attending this event then?
I think about 8 o'clock, 8:30.
And have the crowd started to grow then in anticipation for her?
Absolutely. Everyone's starting to come through the doors. The event started at 6:30 and it's still growing every second. People are coming through the door, piling through the doors. It's a popular place, a hotspot at the moment.
Do you want to show us around a little bit with the camera?
Absolutely. I'll show us around.
Oh, there they are. Yep.
So there's a nice teal, absolutely beautiful.
Beautiful teal.
And then we have some gorgeous political signs over here.
There she is.
Absolutely gorgeous. And everyone's just having a really nice time at the moment, just chillaxing and enjoying the atmosphere and environment.
Very good.
So now, Monique Ryan, she's one of the more high-profile independents that are running tonight in the election, and she is a Climate 200-backed independent.
That's correct.
What are some of the policies that she's running on? How is she going to try and unseat the Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg?
Well, she believes that climate change is a real issue, and we need to change the way that we're currently, using coal and everything, and switch to renewable energy. She's a very proud believer of that. And also she has a lot of other really good policies.
Good policies about integrity, isn't she? She's wanting to hold integrity for, especially for women. I think she's going to get a big woman vote. Yep. That's fantastic, Natalie. Thank you very much. We'll check in with you again. Thank you
very much. Thank you.
Now we're going to head back to Studio B, have another chat about hung parliament.
Oh, there's so much to talk about with the hung parliament.
Yeah, I want to hear more about hung parliament, so let's go back there again.
Hey guys, you want to hear more, and I've got a whole heap for you. As you were saying, we've heard over this campaign, there's a real possibility that neither party wins the 76-seat majority needed to govern in their own right. If this happens, they'll have to convince independents and minor party representatives in the lower house to join them and form a minority government. Of course, there are pros and cons to a hung parliament. Think of it like an auction, where the winning party must be the highest bidder in the negotiations. Hung parliaments can be a benefit to our democratic system because it means parties must forge agreements with a more diverse group of people, generally meaning that a greater number of views in each seat is represented. Look, it is a balancing act though. Parties that make promises to independents that aren't along their party lines run the risk of upsetting their rank and file. But at the same time, if you can't promise enough in the negotiations, it's likely you won't get to form government. We did see a similar situation in 2010 when Julia Gillard eventually formed a minority government with 3 independents. This election is a little different though, as the Teals have preempted the possibility of a hung parliament and run a lot of their campaign platform on the idea. At this stage, crossbenchers and Teal independents alike have been fairly coy about how they'd react to a hung parliament, and we're not quite sure how those negotiations to form government would go as yet. Like you guys were saying, independents such as Monique Ryan in Kooyong, Allegra Spender in Wentworth, and Zoe Daniel in Goldstein have all said they'd be prepared to negotiate with either side if their campaign platforms are met. Some independents have used stronger language though. Incumbent Warringah independent Zali Steggall went as far as to say negotiating with Scott Morrison would be a deal breaker for her in delivering a minority government. As you were saying as well, Climate 200's backing of several Teal candidates shows that climate integrity will be at the centre of many horse trades, but there's no doubt even climate denier LNP politicians will show their green thumbs if it means they have a chance of government. Think back to 2010 where even conservative ex-National independent Bob Katter sided with Julia Gillard to hold onto his seat in Kennedy. And look, just a note, independents coming up and shaking the parties up can only be a good thing, but it goes without saying that to go head-to-head with the sitting treasurer in an affluent seat like Kooyong means you've got some money behind you. It makes you think, what about those safe seats where voters don't have a third option? Seats like Scullen in Melbourne's northwest, where Labor holds by over 20% and nearly 10% of the population live in poverty. Or grey in rural South Australia, where over 14% of the population live in poverty and the coalition holds by over 13%. You'd think these seats are in greater need of a mover and shaker independent, but there's a gap in those voters' ballot papers. It's not just independents though. Promised spending in safe seats only comes knee-high to the party spends in seats that are marginal. The seat where I'm from, Corio in Victoria's southwest, has a poverty rate of 10% and is safe Labor. Just over the electorate border is one of the most marginal seats in the country, Corangamite, which you've heard a lot about tonight, which encompasses a lot of the affluent Surf Coast. Labor's promised $142 million to hold on to marginal Corangamite, but only $17.2 million to their much safer play in Corio. So it begs the question, are they spending to help the people that need it or to hold on to power? This isn't just a red issue. The Coalition's funding promises currently sit at $0 in poverty-stricken Scullin, but have pork-barreled over $387 million to win DeBell from Labor on New South Wales' fairly affluent Central Coast. Look, it is a little late to start an independent campaign in these safe seats, but perhaps backing independents in future elections is something of a priority. For now, though, it'll be interesting to see if the funds promised in marginal seats will help either party on their path to victory. Tom, Jackie?
For that one, Gabe. Now, we've got some results that are starting to come through. Nothing really is a surprise with these results, though, are there? There's 4 seats that have been called for the Liberal Party. Sam, do you know which seats there's been yet?
I've not got that here for you.
I got it for you.
Yeah.
Oh.
What's that? Is that not it?
Yeah, that's it.
Oh, okay, so we've got seat of Marinaro, which is retained. Now, these are all retained by the Liberal Party. These are not swinging to the Liberal Party.
Okay. So these aren't shocks.
These aren't shocks. These are not shocks.
Yeah.
They're coming in. Also, this is, as I said before, about them opening up the postal votes and the pre-polling.
Yeah.
Liberals tend to vote, like the pre-polling is usually Liberals voting first.
Okay.
I don't know why. They're different types of people.
Yeah.
And so in those seats, they'll be going back from the pre-polling, so it's not surprising to me that these seats are coming out as called.
They're more
for
regional
the
seats,
Liberal
aren't
Party.
they, as well?
Certainly, they're Queensland seats. They are Liberal seats. We have, though, I've just sort of...
We have 2 New South Wales
been false there,
and a Victorian seat.
Yeah.
And also independent, who is quite a larrikin and quite a well-known independent, Bob Catter.
We love Bob Catter.
Has been called to retain his seat as well. For this election, so that wasn't a surprise either. We were expecting him to retain his seat in North Queensland, which will be interesting. Now, one of the seats that is going to be a bit interesting is Christina Keneally's seat, isn't it, that she's running in New South Wales?
Yeah, so Christina Keneally is running against a independent Di Lee. Now, Di Lee got in a bit of trouble from people because she is very closely connected to the Liberal Party.
Mm-hmm.
So,
as you'd expect.
Yes.
Yes.
And a lot of the independents are a bit connected to the Liberal Party, but that has been one of the issues. Now, Christina Keneally is a senator. We all know her American accent.
Former New South Wales Premier.
Former New South Wales Premier.
Yeah.
Senator, and she is running in Fowler, which is Labor held by 16%, which you think is huge.
Exactly.
You would think.
Yeah.
But now we're hearing, all the reports we're hearing are that Christina is in big trouble. Di Lee is, possibly going to take the seat, which would mean, do we lose Christina from Parliament?
We do. Well, she's no longer going to be running in the Senate for re-election for this election. So, I think if she were to win this seat, she'd become one of the most decorated politicians in Australian history.
Especially
Premier,
as a woman.
Leader of the Upper House, and then a member of Parliament in the House of Representatives. But if she's lost, it's a massive shock, because what does it say for Labor's chances tonight if they're losing a 16% swing?
Perfect. All right. So we also have the minor parties.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. None of the minor parties, like the Greens, will ever. Well, ever, I don't say ever, but...
Never say never.
No, never say never. But none of them this election will win enough seats to form government, but they're building their primary vote among young voters, which you heard in that package before. Everyone's going Greens, Greens, Greens. A lot of those people who are disenfranchised by the offerings of the 2 major parties, their slogans have changed slightly. So rather than aiming to actually form a government, They want more seats in the lower house, more than the one Adam Bandt that we've got now. And they're running their policy further and faster. So that means they want to push the government further and faster on climate policies. Our reporter, Ada Hall, spoke with one of the volunteers at the pre-polling centre on Gipp Street in Collingwood. Let's take a look at that.
I went down to the pre-polling centre in Abbotsford to speak to volunteers working for the Greens political party. I spoke with Julie, who's a first-time volunteer, on what or who informs her decision in regards to voting.
I have to say, this election, I've been, well prior to it, I've been really concerned about climate change, and I'm really anxious that we have a change of government on that count. When I got Adam Bandt's flyer in my letterbox, it was actually a little booklet, and I read through it, and I basically was in tears by the end of it, because every single issue I cared about was mentioned in that, and issues that no one else is talking about.
I asked Julie what issues she wants to see targeted first by the elected party.
It is a no-brainer that we have to confront climate change, and there are our neighbours, you know, in New South Wales who are still dealing with the outcome of floods, our neighbours in Victoria who are still unhoused after bushfires. It's too easy to forget about that. That's people's lives. And I'm astonished that we could be so heartless and so willing to turn our backs on our neighbours in our own country who are suffering from these things. And we need much better plans. It's going to be more emergencies. We need better ways of dealing with them.
Julie believes the current government is ignoring the calls for climate action.
Look, I think the biggest factor in denial is huge business interests that are vested in the kinds of businesses that keep on making money out of coal and gas. To me, it's incredible that people could sit in boardrooms knowing that they are damaging and killing people and creatures and the earth on which we live, and they could still decide that they're just going to keep doing that. To me, I don't know how they sleep at night. I don't understand it.
Ada Hall for RMIT's election.
Great, very good, Greens. Now let's look at another minor party. We've got our reporter, he is a third year, brilliant guy, Tom Paisley.
Brilliant.
Paisley, actually. And he has done a story for us about the Victorian Socialists. Now, what do you know of the Victorian Socialists?
Oh, they're a party that's growing in a lot of the inner suburbs of Melbourne, like the Brunswicks, that side of the Fitzroy, that side of town. A lot of people really interested in some of their policies. They're looking at, you know, providing more of a socialist kind of agenda, thinking that that's a better way for us to live as a country. So they're trying to go towards that. And yeah, I'd be very interested to see what Tom has found with his piece about this.
Before we go to the package, I'll give you a little anecdote.
Okay.
My cousin, my step-cousin, is actually running for the Socialists.
Really?
And she was doing door knocking the other day and was abused by someone and kind of got threatened to strangled, I'm not sure.
Wow.
But the Socialists are sort of copying it, I think, at the moment. But let's take a look at what Tom Paisley has found there with the Victorian Socialists.
We're here today outside Thornbury's Salvation Army Hall, where election day is looming and pre-polling efforts are in full swing. We've come to have a talk with some of the Victorian Socialists volunteers to see how they hope their election campaign might fare this year. A relatively new party, only on the electoral roll for 4 years, they're hopeful that this election they might lay the groundwork for a future in politics.
This federal election campaign for Victorian Socialists is a bit different from the last one. The last one we ran in 4 seats and this one we're running in 11, so it's quite a bit more ambitious. The way we see the federal election is more as preparation for the state campaign in November, which we think that we have a really good chance of winning. The last time we ran in the state election, we came 4th in the Northern Metro on first preference votes, and we just lost because of preference deals. So this is really more about laying the basis for a victory in the state election.
We basically run on volunteers, and
our volunteers have been incredibly helpful for our campaign in doing door knocking, chatting to people on their doorstep about the issues that concern them, letterboxing. We've actually just completed letterboxing and door knocking the entirety of the Cooper electorate, which is tens of thousands of homes and tens of thousands of people we've spoken to about socialist politics. The rich are continuing to get richer and the poor are continuing to get poorer. Our living standards are declining, like the inflation crisis basically at the moment now, the cost of living, all that stuff's going up, but our wages have been stagnant for so long now. All this work we're doing right now for the federal election, all the hours we're putting into campaigning, into volunteering, and just speaking to people about socialist politics, that it will be, putting us in good footing, basically, to make a real impact to get the first Victorian socialist, senator elected in the state parliament in Victoria later this year.
While the Victorian Socialists are still a relatively young and up-and-coming party, they do seem to have accounted for the future in positioning themselves as an alternative to the established political parties that we're also familiar with. This has been Tom Pazis for RMIT's election coverage, signing off.
And let's now head to Fowler, where we have Narlan from the University of Sydney. How are you, Narlan?
Narlan!
How are you, Narlan?
Hey guys.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Very good. Thank you for having me.
And so can you just tell us where exactly you are in Fowler?
Yeah, so I'm currently at independent candidate Diley's election party night. And as you can see, probably can't see much behind me, but they're currently just calling out the early polls and Diley is leading at the moment. But I have to say, yeah, it's very early times, of course, but the vibes are very optimistic. Everyone's enjoying themselves. So yeah, they're very hopeful that they can pull off a massive upset.
So we were just talking before on air about how it's almost been a 17% swing away from Labor towards Diley. Now, why is this? What's causing this massive change in votes?
So a major talking point in the lead up to this campaign was the fact that Christina Keneally, Labor's decision to move her from the Senate to the House of Representatives and run for the seat of Fowler was almost controversial because she's not a local here, whereas Diley is. She's a local representative. She is the deputy mayor of Fairfield and has a heap of support behind her. So I think, Labor has been winning this seat for 38 consecutive years. So the fact that people are getting behind Diley now as an independent and as a local representative is what's separating her from the Labor candidate.
Great. You said before that they're putting the numbers are coming through. You said it's very small numbers, but how many is it? Do you know?
It's very early. I don't know. They were calling it out. But essentially they're leading just. So it's only like less than 5%, I would say.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely Diley coming in first, and then Christina Keneally, and then the rest of the candidates follow through. But it's very early.
Yeah.
So yeah, they just made a little announcement that she is leading, and people got very excited.
Okay, good.
So we've been watching the polls for Fowler, and we've seen it shrink and get smaller and smaller and smaller. What were the most latest polls saying before today for this district?
There was a poll done actually a couple of weeks ago that was causing a lot of talk that essentially Diley wasn't the favourite coming into here, and that Christina Keneally's campaign is essentially coming under pressure. They were saying that she was the favourite because if we go back to the 2019 federal election, it was a 14% margin win for Labor, but they're saying now that it's going to be a much tighter race and it will be neck and neck right until the very end.
So will we have a result by tonight, or is it going to be something that's going to be take a while because of mail-in ballots or mail-in votes, or pre-polling votes? Like, are we going to expect a result tonight?
We expect it to be tonight, as they're saying now. It could be very late tonight, but essentially it could roll into tomorrow. But obviously with the pre-polls and the postal votes, it will take a while.
And is Di there yet? You mentioned to me earlier or yesterday that you might be able to talk to her. Is she there?
Can we get Di?
Can we get her over?
Let's just see. I might ask someone now and see if we can get her over.
Good. Let's ask if we can get her over. It would be really good to chat to her.
Yeah, to see what she's
See
feeling
what
like.
she thinks. Yep, absolutely.
Because obviously we can see as much polls as we like. We can hear.
We can
about
look
it,
at polls. We can hear about everything. Yeah.
but we can never be. Yeah.
No. We never hear from the people. We want to hear from the people.
I'm just going to see if we can get her now.
Oh, yeah, it sounds like we are getting her now. And what will we ask her?
Oh,
What do you think we should ask her?
Well, I mean,
Do you think you're going to win?
Whether she thinks that that Christina Keneally being dropped into the seat really had an effect, because of course there was going to be the Labor candidate, Vietnamese Labor candidate, who wanted to run for Fowler, and of course Fowler has it's about 16% Vietnamese population in the electorate, so it's a really sort of important part. That cultural and linguistic diversity is really important there. So if Christina Keneally's been dropped in, perhaps inappropriately, maybe that's shifted how things have worked out.
Maybe we can try another time to try and get her on to.
Oh, is that her there?
Onto the call,
Okay,
but.
great. She's going to be over in a minute, so you guys will get the chance to speak to her.
Great. We'll come back to you.
Okay, great.
Can you just just let us know when she's back, and we'll love to ask her. Love to ask her if she's connected with the Libs or not.
I'm sure she'd love to answer that as well.
She probably doesn't want it. Thank you so much there. Nala, we'll talk to you soon. Perfect. Now, let's have a look at national security. One of the big stories out of today, which everyone's seen all over social media, is these text messages.
Text messages coming through. There supposedly was a boat that was stopped off the coast of Australia coming from Sri Lanka, and it has been intercepted by Border Force. And text messages went out. Is that correct, Sam?
Yes, absolutely. There were mass text messages sent out. The coalition has confirmed, sort of using that event and then sort of following it up with a stance that's strong on national security.
And did it go to everyone around Australia, or was it specific seats?
As far as we understand, it was specific seats that they were targeting, rather than sort of the entirety of Australia. But as we know,
we're just going to go back to.
Sorry, we're just telling we've got Nate.
We have Nate.
Hello, Di Lee. Hello, we can't hear you. You put your are you on mute? Oh, there we can. Oh no, we're back.
We're back.
We've got two conversations running right now. We're waiting for Di Lee. And we are also talking about these text messages. Can we just say first what the text messages said? Do you remember? We got them up.
We absolutely can.
I believe it was something about how only the Liberal and the National Party, so the LNP, will be able to stop the boats and protect Australia's border. So vote Liberals, I believe, was something along those lines.
Yeah, but they said that there was a boat intercepted.
It was intercepted,
absolutely.
yeah, and they turned it back, and it showed the strength of the Border Force and the strength of the coalition in protecting our borders. Supposedly, that's their line of thought.
That is we think their line of thought, and this isn't surprising because national security has been a big play issue in elections historically. We did have the 2001 Tampa affair, followed by the Children Overboard affair. For those that don't know, the Children Overboard affair
let's think about
immediately prior to the 2001 election, where it was reported that children were thrown overboard from asylum seeker boats trying to enter Australia.
Days before the election,
Days before the election, and so we can see there's a really similar sort of thing that's happening here with those text messages.
And there has been allegations, I might just add, from some Labor people that this was known a few weeks or a few days in advance that there was going to be a boat coming across to Australia, and that it is a political stunt for tonight and for today to try and gather a bit more votes.
Absolutely, and it is being used by the coalition, as it always has, as a way to sort of show a tough stance on national security and to really rally up that kind of what might be quite a xenophobic stance, or otherwise just a fear of surrounding national security. But despite a raft of national security issues cropping up with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the AUKUS deal, and tensions with the French president, the Taliban's takeover of Afghanistan last year, plus the Solomon Islands security deal with China. None of that has really been a top issue for voters. We've seen it's rather been cost of living, aged care, and climate change that's topping that list. But the security deal in the Solomons could have an impact in electorates with large Chinese Australian populations. So Australia's increasing tensions with China don't really bode well for electorates like Chisholm, which, as we know, is ultra-marginal with Liberal Gladys Liu. So for Sogavare, the Solomons Prime Minister, the deal is sort of seen as a strategic move to gain Chinese investment. While it's also has then led to the US swooping in for support investment to sort of counter that. But then what about Australia's reaction? Where's Australia in all of this? Unfortunately, it's come during an election campaign, and so that's meant Peter Dutton seized on it to reassert his tough on China approach, saying that Australia should prepare for war. And that kind of tough language was heavily criticised by Labor, particularly by Kevin Rudd. But it's obviously we can see that that sort of narrative is really playing out with these texts being sent out. Now, the Solomon Prime Minister did react to all of those comments by saying that countries like Australia don't care if atoll countries go underwater in 20 years' time. So clearly, there is also that link to the coalition's climate change policies that have come into play. But yeah, so as we know, elections are lively things. They do these sort of texts have come up just very suddenly. And might end up affecting things. But we do also hopefully have with us now photojournalist and Hazara refugee Bharat Ali Batoor, who will maybe be able to give us some perspective on sort of where these issues around asylum seekers and boats and national security can really affect refugees that are living in Australia.
Bharat, have we got you there?
Hi, yes.
Hello, how are you going?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Good, thank you. So what does this mean? What does this election mean for refugees, do you think? What are the big issues? And this is, there are refugees who are unable to vote because they are not citizens, but these new, there are 440,000 new voters that are migrants this year. So what does this election mean for them?
First of all, thank you very much for having me on your live show here. This election is very important for refugees because in many ways, first of all, for around 30,000 refugees who are on different temporary visas like bridging visas, temporary protection visas, SHIV visas, who have been living uncertain lives under this government for the last 10 years. They have been separated from their families for this long, and they haven't, most of them, they haven't seen their children growing up, they haven't seen, they couldn't say the last goodbye to their dying parents, or they couldn't, they missed a lot of their personal lives and very basic human rights, which everyone deserves. And we have experienced firsthand during the lockdown, which how it feels to be separated from loved ones for a very short of time as compared to those people who have been separated for the last 10 years. So this is very crucial, very important. And so this election is a lot of hopes are connected to this. And also there are families, those who are on permanent visas, they have been also separated from their families because they cannot reunite. Their cases have been given the least priority to by the under this government's policy. And also citizenships have been delayed for a lot of refugees. For the it has taken many years, the application, they have been delayed so intentionally. And also one of the criterias with this for refugees have been this, because if you're not citizens, so your application would be given the least priority for the family reunification. So there are these all very cruel policies are attached to the to this refugee issue, and they are being intentionally punished with all these policies connected to this. And also the refugees are hoping that there will be a change, so there can be some hope for them to live a life with hope, with dignity, and be able to live together with their families.
Yeah. And so what do you make then of these last-minute mass texts from the coalition that has been sent out praising their ability to turn back boats of refugees who are trying to come to Australia? Like, what do you make of these texts?
I think this is a very calculated tactic of fear in the last minute to kind of like influence those people who are like undecided where to vote. So I think this was a very calculated attempt in order to get some votes, like using the same kind of fear tactic of like dehumanizing refugees and like scaring people off refugees, like kind of presenting them in a way that they are a big threat to society. So I'm sure like a lot of people in Australia, they have already learned about it, that how the politics have been.
Tell me what you think about the refugees being released from the Park Hotel in Carlton. This is just a Melbourne-specific question. It went on, across the other hotels that they were kept in Brisbane, some even in Perth. But from the Park Hotel one, there were stages of the release that were all the way back to August. But these ones that we saw there was April 2nd, I think, and March, and leading right up close to the election. Definitely before the campaign was called, though. These groups of refugees were released from the hotel with no sort of rhyme or reason, no logic, often late on a Friday night. A couple of them on a Friday night before a public holiday, lots of people going away, not many people paying attention. What do you think the government was attempting to do there in that move that they've made before beginning their campaign?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. Because yeah, you're right. Like most of these refugees were released on a Friday night, because when everything was closed down, and they have very minimum support when they were out after 9 years in a community that they were not very familiar with, and they didn't have they have the least support. So, and also I think it could be one of the reasons that I can is like throughout Australia, the refugee advocates or organizations and people, they have been advocating for the rights of refugees. And also we saw like unaccompanied minors, they grew up in these detention centers and also on the offshore processing centers like Nauru and PNG. So they were teenage boys and they grew up, like they become an adult inside detention centers as locked up. And I think the government read the mind, or like they knew about what people were thinking about it. So it was bringing probably they were probably with these attempts, they wanted to get some sympathy from the election. So this was also an election attempt. So because they could do these years before, they didn't. All these years to be
a campaign move, you think?
Yeah,
like attempt for this election to gain some vote, because locking up without any reason, like if killed someone, so their punishment would have been like certain, like okay, this is your punishment for this how many for these much years you will be in prison, and or this is the fine. But for refugees, it was indefinite detention, and they didn't know when they will be released. I think. Attempt.
Yeah, well, we thank you very much for giving us the time today, Bharat. Yeah, thank you very much.
A pleasure.
Have a great night.
Thank you. Now we are going back to Nayland, who is in Fowler. Christina Keneally is running there, but we are speaking there with Di Lee, the independent. We're hoping to talk to her. I'm hoping to ask her a question that no one wants me to ask her, but I'm going to ask it anyway. And we got her there. Hello, Daily.
Hi, we're standing outside here in the club because it's very noisy inside and it's wet out here. So
Oh no!
maybe you can make it quick. That'd be great.
Oh, no, we will make it
People
quick.
waiting for us inside.
Very good. How are you feeling?
Overwhelmed, but you know, some of the early results have been quite positive.
Yeah.
But it's still, you know, look, it's very overwhelmed.
Yeah. What was the polling saying for you? Do you know?
At this stage, it looks like, you know, I'm slightly ahead. But look, it's still early days.
And when you first announced your candidacy for this seat, did you think that you had a chance to really upset Labor and yes, swing 17%?
Well, I believe that I was going to rock the boat. And of course, you know, when you go enter into a race, you always enter with the mindset to really win, but also knowing realistically that it's Mount Everest to climb. So therefore, you know, there's those kind of thoughts and thinking and feeling that can it be achievable, right? Is it achievable or not? But all I wanted to do was to make it possible for my community.
Di, tell me, there's been some criticism of you that you're too connected to the Liberal Party. What do you think about that?
Look, you know, my focus has been to represent my community, and that's how I focus on that. It's about having a voice for our community and just fighting for our community. Look, stones can be thrown at me from every single, you know, Liberal, from every corner. So it doesn't matter. That's not my focus. My focus is to actually ensure that my community gets a voice and gets the ability so that we can get the resources, the federal resources that we have so long neglected. So that's my focus.
And so what is the main thing that you want to bring to the electorate of Fowler? Why did you want to campaign and why do you want this seat?
Why? Because it has been neglected. It has been abandoned by both the major parties. It's been too safe. So therefore, for the Labor Party to take it for granted, for the Liberal Party, they couldn't care less because they can't win it. So therefore, nobody really stood up and fought for our community. Federal resources such as our hospital just been so neglected. It's acting like one of our major hospitals, Fairfield, acts like a medical center rather than our hospital. And we were locked down, and during that lockdown, we weren't able to, you know, travel beyond the 5K. So there are a lot of issues that really were barriers for our community. That's just one of them. Small businesses suffered a lot through the lockdown. And so a lot of our community really suffered tremendously. Our growth and infrastructure. So too many to name, guys.
No, too many to name. Just one last question. 2016 census data says about 62% of the population there live in the most socioeconomic disadvantaged areas of the country. Do you think that's increased through the pandemic since 2016?
Look, I'm sure it has increased in a sense that because of the lockdown, a lot of people lost their jobs, and that, you know, that has caused a lot of difficulties for families out here, majority that are migrants and refugees. So, and the rising increase of you know, groceries now and housing affordability, absolutely, it's no doubt has caused a lot of issues for our community.
Well, thank you very much for that, Ms. Lee. We hope you have a great night and good luck for tonight, and hopefully you get the result you like.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for giving us the time. Thank you. Now we're going to head to Studio B. Lachlan, do you have any news for us?
Yeah, I have even more data for you. Very interesting segment earlier, interview about refugees. Clearly a big issue, and we're going to start in the seat of Cook again. Scott Morrison, the architect, really one of the architects of that boat turn back policy. He's got the trophy that says he's stopped these. Right now it looks like he's set to stay in Kirribilli House, possibly, because he's definitely going to remain the leader of the Liberal Party, at least tonight. Now we'll head to Warringah, staying in New South Wales. That's the fight to save the planet from Zali Steggall or to save women from Catherine Deebs. Right now voters are more interested in the planet. Now we'll head to Nichols. Now this is a very interesting seat. Currently the Nationals are holding it, but the thing is there's been quite a significant swing. No, Corangamite, sorry. Corangamite. Now here at the top we have the Mayor of Geelong, high profile candidate flown in for the Liberal Party. Now, there's been an 8% swing to the Greens here, and that's really going to help Labor try and get over the line. Possibly those votes will coalesce and try and trump the mayor. We'll see if that happens. Now we'll head to Nichols. There we go, there it is. So Nichols, that is a national seat, and the Nationals do appear to be in front there. Yes, they are. Now, this is a very interesting seat because you can see independents number 2, there's been a 21.5% swing towards the independents in that seat. That's just on the first votes that have come in. Again, we're talking very, very small numbers here, so you can't read into that a lot, but that is quite extreme. We'll head now to Hughes. Now, earlier we were talking about Craig Kelly and how he has defected from the Liberal Party, and really, he won that seat on the Liberal Party's preferences. They didn't sign up for the United Australia Party. That appears to be the message they are sending Craig there. He's in 4th at the moment, and they're looking to retain a Liberal with the Liberals' new candidate. Now, lastly, we will head to Dixon. Always like to end with a Queensland seat. Now, Peter Dutton here, he wants us to go to war with China, and it appears that he will lead, possibly, Queensland to that war. He's winning in Dixon. So, we'll go back to you in the studio, Tom and Jack.
Information about some of the seats that have been started to be
Something's
called?
happening.
Yes, we do. How exciting!
Oh, finally! Yeah.
Yeah, so when you do look at what the amount that's been counted in all the different seats, you know, generally if it's over 10% counted, then we can kind of start to get an idea of what the swing is and what that might mean. So by far the majority where they've counted plenty, it's the incumbents are remaining in those, but there are a few where you'll find that there's a bit of a change. So we're seeing that in Robertson in New South Wales, which is held by the Coalition, and so there's current 14% has been counted, and we currently have a 5.79% swing to the Labor Party.
Which
to
was
the
a
LP.
seat that the Labor Party were targeting heavily with.
Yes, absolutely. And then as well as that, we have Gilmore in New South Wales, which it was a Labor incumbent, and we've got about 21.88% counted, and that's a 5.9% swing to the Coalition. So it looks like that's
to the
tending
Coalition.
towards the Coalition.
So that
there in
might,
New South
that
Wales.
swing, that is a Labor seat swinging.
That is a Labor seat swinging. And
Wow.
then on top of that, we do have a very high profile seat, Chisholm in Victoria, that has the incumbent LNP
Gladys
coalition,
Liu.
Gladys Liu. And so that's only had 9.8% counted. So, you know, we are kind of, we're definitely jumping the gun a little bit here, but there's, that's had a 2.5% swing to Labor. So that's sort of what we're seeing at the moment. It's just really those 3 seats where we're seeing significant change. Plenty of other seats are being called, but they are all very much remaining with the incumbents. But that's the
Those are the
update for
ones that
now.
are moving.
So there is some movement happening.
There's some
interesting results that are starting to come through then.
Getting nervous now.
Yeah. Now we're going to check in with Georgie in Casey now. Georgie, you there?
Oh, that is not Georgie.
Hello, I'm here.
Oh, there she is. Hello, Georgie. How are you going?
I'm here. I'm good. I'm actually here with Claire Ferris-Miles.
Oh,
who
lovely.
is-
Hello. Just
so
pop
she
in.
can't. So because of the technical difficulties, she won't be able to hear you, but I will be able to ask her some questions.
Yeah,
So Claire, how
fantastic.
have you found the polling process today?
Oh, it's just been fantastic. Huge energy and excitement across the electorate. What I'm hearing is people want change, which is incredibly exciting. I just don't know if there's enough votes to come in to turn Casey independent, which is very, very hopeful.
So you are feeling hopeful?
I'm always hopeful. We describe our campaign as nervously optimistic, that Casey wants a different type of representation.
What's it like being like a mother of 5 kids and then quitting your job to run for politics? What's that sort of experience been like for you?
Well, it's much more than me. It is a community of people that want to see a different style of politics that's more positive, and it's more about us, that the power sits with us rather than the parties. So that's what's been incredibly joyful about the campaign.
Okay. And how has the response been? Is it to your run? Like how's that?
Well, I've had hundreds of volunteers.
What question were we asking? Casey. We've lost audio there. So, yeah, we'll try and get it back, but...
Can you hear me?
Oh, you're back.
back.
We just
Yeah, we
lost
got it
audio
back.
for
Got
a
it back.
second there.
Oh, that's okay.
Just one final question there would be good.
Yeah. What's the plan after tonight?
I have no plan. So I think we're just going to enjoy tonight and see what the people of Casey say about what their future representative could be, and we'll go from there.
Great.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Georgie. Lovely. Now we're going to cross to Adriana. She's from the University of Sydney and she is in Wentworth. Big seat, big independent running against Dave Sharma there, who is a Liberal, sort of a moderate Liberal.
Moderate, yeah. One of the moderate Liberals that are being challenged by the independents.
Yeah, Adriana, you there?
Here.
Hi.
Hope you guys are doing, yes. So yeah, I'm here at the Allegra Spender party, election party. We were in Dave's before. So here people are really excited. The counting has just begun. They're around 8% of counting, but Allegra is winning with a margin over 60%. So they're really excited, even with the pre-polling that it went over 50%, which is usually leans to Liberal, but now we're seeing something different. So let's see what happens. Allegra is not here yet. But if she comes here, we definitely try to talk to her. And yes, this is really, really exciting. No one knows what's going to happen.
No. Tell us about who is Allegra Spender. She's not unknown in the community.
Yeah, so Allegra Spender is an independent candidate. She's been campaigning for a while, since November. She has a campaign that goes a lot about like climate change. She talks a lot about economy. So she's an independent candidate that leans a little bit to Liberal. Her father was a Liberal MP. And so he's known for that a lot. She's known for that a lot.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's going to be something different if she wins. Like this seat here has been held for Liberals for a long time. They only had two independent candidates before. The last one was Carrie Phelps in 2019.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's see what happens.
So you said that Allegra Spender's father was part of the Liberal Party. If we're in the event of a hung parliament, are we expecting Allegra to throw her support behind the coalition and hopefully help them create a minority government?
Well, we can't answer for sure, but yeah, I would say so. That she would go. She claims that no, she claims that she is an independent candidate and that's her differential, that she decided to be an independent candidate. So she's not behind anyone. She can make the best decisions for Wentworth. Yeah, but we never know.
That's fantastic, Adriana. And you'll be heading over to Dave Sharma later on? Is that right?
Yes.
Yep,
yes,
so we'll
that's
check
right,
in with
correct.
you there. That will be
Yeah,
fantastic.
Sure.
Lovely,
Yes.
lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Now we're just going to pop over to Studio B again.
We're not going to be.
We're not.
So
No.
Allegra Spender,
Yes.
it's an interesting race, her one. She's one of the major Climate 200 candidates as well, isn't she, Sam?
She is.
She definitely is.
Yeah, and so why has she decided to target this seat, do you think?
I think it's following the same trend as all the other independents, with these moderate Liberals. I also saw that Dave Sharma got in similar trouble than Gladys Liu with these purple-coloured signs as well.
Those teal-coloured signs.
Teal-coloured,
yeah.
sorry, excuse me.
Similar to
Yeah.
Allegra's for
Yeah.
his own election pamphlets before the election.
Yes,
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what that does to the results, hey, and if
No.
anyone's got a bit tricked this time and maybe votes for him thinking he's the independent. But we'll find out later tonight.
If they get confused.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Who knows? But we're going to go to Lachlan now in Studio B. How are you, Lachlan?
Okay, so a couple more results here. All seats set to be retained by their respective members. We will start now over here on our magic board in Kooyong. Kooyong, again, the independents were very hopeful to try and take this seat from Josh Frydenberg. It doesn't look like it's going to happen. Josh Frydenberg with a commanding lead so far, but again, these are very small numbers. It's only a few votes coming in at the moment. We'll move on to our next seat, and there we go. We can see the race there, and that's another seat there set to be retained by the Liberals. Let's move on again. And we're in Bass. Now, Bass is the seat of Bridget Archer. She famously crossed the floor over the Religious Discrimination Bill. We talked about that a little bit earlier. It doesn't look like Bass is going to cross away from Bridget Archer, though. They're keeping her, and they're hoping to retain her as well. That's what the early numbers are saying. And let's go now to our next seat, which is Indy. Now, that's with Helen Haynes. Again, another independent. It looks like she's going to keep that seat. She was very successful in 2019, and it looks like she'll be successful again there. So we'll cross back to you in the studio. Oh no, we've got one more. We've got Goldstein, of course, and that's with Zoe Daniel from the ABC, a journalist, very politically engaged. We try to keep it impartial here. It looks like, though, Tim Smith, he's going to retain that seat. Again, that's been another unsuccessful challenger. But again, these are very, very early results, and we're only counting the votes from today. Not postal votes, not pre-polling, that's all still to come. So stay with us. We'll have even more numbers for you very, very shortly.
Thanks very much for that, Lachlan. Appreciate that.
You're watching RMIT's election coverage. Coming up in our next hour, more great analysis, all the results, they're coming through now, they're flying through. So we will take a little short break and we'll see you in a few minutes.
Can I leave?
Yeah, everyone needs shine, so just do.
I'll be back in 3 minutes. We're back.
I'm gonna go in there. Come in. Hi. Good?
Doing well.
Really want to talk about women. Really want to run to opinions.
Yeah, twins are coming out.
Yeah, and Welcome back to RMIT's live election coverage. We've got plenty coming up this hour. Now, this hour is the big hour because this is where we're starting to get some results really coming through. Now, what we can see here on our live screens is that Labor is now leading. There was a big sort of coalition, not swing, but a win going on, and now Labor has now overtaken it. So Labor is winning 52 to 45. They need 76 to win. The 76 to win is what either party needs to get to. It's constantly being updated, constantly coming through, so very exciting. Now we've got some specific seats to look at that have been held on to by some pretty prominent people. So Sam, what is going on?
Yes, what's going on?
What is going on?
Excellent question. So what I guess first, top of the line is banks, which was potentially going to be one that the Labor was looking at to get. Looks like that's going to be retained by the Liberals. Does look like there's a 2% swing against them, but they'll retain that seat anyway. We then some of the more surprising ones are in Brisbane and Higgins. So Brisbane, we're seeing about an 8.3% swing towards Labor. And then in Higgins, we are seeing about a 5% swing to Labor as well.
Who held Brisbane?
So both of those are LNP, the coalition.
Yeah.
And of course, both Brisbane and Higgins were really touted as potential battlegrounds, not just for Labor, but for Greens as well.
And Greens have just seen, have got 28.1% of the first preference votes in Brisbane, which would be huge because a few Labor people are worried that Brisbane might be snatched underneath them from the Greens at this election and they lose a seat they've been working really hard on for the last few years.
Something pretty big about Higgins, it was a marginal seat, 2.6%, so now it's now one? Or it's a swing?
It's got a 5% swing towards Labor.
5% swing towards Labor. This seat is a Liberal seat that has been held since 1975. And it's held by Dr. Katie Allen, and now it's southeast Melbourne. It's kind of South Yarra, Paran area. It's not as far as Toorak, Kooyong, Hawthorn, but southeast Melbourne. Saw yesterday down there, I was actually in St Kilda, and I saw a lot of volunteers going around with the Katie Allen signs on their backs, and they were very hunched.
Very Josh Frydenberg.
Very Frydenberg style. They were very hunched over, not looking very happy to be doing that job. So that is a big, interesting loss because that is a LNP coalition held seat since 1975.
But how much percent has been counted so far?
A lot of these are in the teens of what's actually been counted. But once it's over 10%, I mean, obviously anything can happen. These swings can change. But it is very interesting. Even in Higgins, in the last few elections, we've had Jason Ball for Greens, and that's failed to take the seat for Higgins. But the Greens have now put a different candidate on there. But even then, now we're seeing ALP potentially going to win the seat. So these have been kind of long brewing. Potential places for Labor and the Greens to be able to take. So this isn't you can kind of maybe put it up to the rise of the independents and the Teals and climate change and all these different issues, but these are seats that have been becoming increasingly left-leaning for quite a long time. And it just potentially this will be the election where it all kind of happens.
Potentially just disillusioned with the current Liberal government. People that have voted Liberal for generations are just now thinking, what is going on here?
And one of those seats where we are looking at that, where people have voted Liberal for a long time and might be switching and changing over, is in Kooyong. So we want to just check back with Natalie in Kooyong. Natalie, how are things over there?
It's great at the moment. It's still quite a lively crowd.
Yeah.
And the crowd is getting a lot bigger than before. As I was standing out here, I could see crowds of people lining up to the door, and I thought, wow, popular hotspot, popular.
Well, we expected that from the amount of attention that Monique Ryan has received over the last few months. Have we heard anything about any of the results that have been coming through?
Well, this is a marginal seat, which is currently held by the Liberal Party with a margin of approximately 5.7%. And the Liberals have held Kooyong since the 21st of February 1945. So if this is the rise of the independents, this will be an absolute revolution because it hasn't changed seats since 1945. Long time.
Absolutely, and 5.5%, most times you'd say that's pretty big enough. It's enough to keep the seat in your name. Now, what was the polls, the most recent polls saying at this election? Are they expecting Miss Ryan to potentially win, or is Josh Frydenberg expected to hold on? What were the sentiments about?
Well, the polls are suggesting there's a strong response to the independent political representative, Dr. Monique Ryan, obviously. She seems to be a very popular and favourite personality around the community, and a lot of people are actually really wanting her to be their newest representative.
Yeah, and we were just talking before about how some Liberal candidates are starting to move on. Sorry, Liberal supporters are starting to move to the independents.
Liberal supporters.
We're seeing that potentially with Monique Ryan. But we want to thank you, Natalie, for giving us your time tonight. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, we want to move on and see Georgie, who's in Casey. How are things going in Casey there, Georgie? Don't have Georgie there. So
Georgie, what have we got, Sam?
That's okay, because we can really sort of, when we start to look at, obviously you've got Kooyong, where we were just crossing to, but then also Goldstein, where we
Zoe Daniel.
have Zoe Daniel. And so, of course, when we do look at Goldstein, we can see that there is about 20% of the vote has been counted, and there is a significant swing towards Zoe Daniel.
As predicted, I think, isn't it?
Well, and so that was one of the seats that where, of all the independents, Tim Wilson was sort of fighting for his life there, and that does seem to have come to fruition.
Hopefully you can tell us a bit more about this. I think we do have Georgie back on for a chat. Georgie, you there?
Can you hear me?
I can indeed, yeah. How are you?
Great, I'm good. I'm still here at Claire Ferris Miles' election party. The crowd is picking up a little bit. It is getting a little bit bigger, and there is a lot of positive energy in the air. With the news that Zali Steggall is set to win her seat in Warringah as a fellow independent, that is positive news, and everyone is feeling quite good here.
So the news that Zali Steggall is going to win her seat is making people at your party believe that they potentially could also take the seat as well. Is that correct?
I wouldn't go as far to say it's making them believe that they would win the seat, but I think that it does bring a little bit of positivity. I mean, Zali has won the seat before, so it is a different situation. I mean, the Liberal Party has held this seat since the early 80s, the 84. But I definitely think seeing other independents do well is a sign in the right direction for everyone here.
And have any results started to come through?
I will be honest, not that I'm aware of. I think there has been a little bit, but nothing substantial to make any sort of calls or comments. I have been quite busy talking to everyone here. So yeah, I haven't personally looked, but I know that there is a little bit of buzz, but yeah, still too early to sort of comment too much on the numbers.
Well, hopefully we'll be able to get some more news from you there, Georgie. Yeah, thank you for giving us the time as well. Hopefully we can, hear more about that seat later on.
Great, thank you guys.
Thanks, Georgie.
Now, we've got a very special segment coming up.
It is a very special segment.
Isn't it?
And why is it special, Jackie?
I think it's special because it's just really fun, funny, dynamic, interesting.
All of those words.
All of those words. Strap yourselves in because you could want to throw up from what we're going to see.
Yeah, potentially.
Not by
in a bad way.
Not by person who's hosting it, no.
Yeah, but
by
some of the comments that were made in it.
Some of the comments from the people in it, where you might get a little bit sick. So I don't want you to throw up over your YouTube screens, whatever you're doing. My grandma is watching. Grandma, hope you're okay. So we're just going to throw it in this package now. Do you have any comments on it?
Oh, strap yourself in, guys. We're about to see the inaugural viewing of Jackie's Japinions.
a few leaders' debates across the commercial channels, and Nine's coverage on Mother's Day was all over the shop. As always, the members of the electorate who are disenfranchised with federal politics can't stand the arguing and semantic battles that go on in question time and in campaigns. Now that the campaign is over, we are free to look and laugh at the rhetorical whataboutery from both Morrison and Albanese.
More questions between the two of you than I've had. No authority whatsoever. This is a very important point. I'm sorry. This is a very important point. No, Mr. Ford, we need to stop you there. Can you please? To make sure you both agreed to the rules for this evening. The Labor Party actually had in place.
Negative gearing is a good thing.
But it wasn't 3 years ago.
Negative gearing. We had a policy that we took to the election where we were not successful.
So is that why you're not approaching?
You said
it's just not popular.
Scott, I'll let you answer.
That's true, what I've just told you.
It's based upon schemes that are actually operating.
Yeah, but is that
so, for example...
Would they have to pay back the 40%?
You will have
a lot of government's getting on it.
Now you did.
No, I was talking about private schemes. You were
talking... We've come up...
So is negative gearing now
in terms of Victoria... You've asked the question,
you haven't answered it though. Do they have to pay it back or no?
That's the way they operate now.
Do they have to pay it back
That's the way.
It's not help to buy, it's forced to sell. Okay,
right.
This is more,
it's
that was more of a statement than a question.
And you have supported it. You have supported it in the past.
No, Anthony, and that's the problem. They're not federal ones, and I've never favoured the federal ones.
Okay, all right. Okay. So you're in favour of state government help to buy schemes, but not federal government help to buy schemes.
Looking at that, there's no wonder people can't stand this stuff. But there were some points worth scrutinising. At one point, Albanese reminded us of his holy trinity.
I came out of the womb a Labor voter, and with three great faiths. I was raised by my late mum, who I pay tribute to today. I came out with three great faiths: the Labor Party, the Catholic Church, and the South Sydney Rugby League Football Club.
Then Morrison was asked why he thinks women don't like him. I haven't cut this. This is literally his answer.
Prime Minister, do you have a problem appealing to women, do you think?
1 in 11 women are the victims of domestic violence that results in their death in this country.
Typical of the coalition, their prized campaign possession is the strength of the economy and their ability to manage money. One go-to slogan is their AAA credit rating, which they maintained throughout the pandemic. But they always fail to mention that this amazing credit rating was due to Labor's efforts. Albanese was quick to call out Morrison on this.
Sarah, the problem with what Scott just said is that the cost of living measures that he spoke about are all temporary. They have all the sincerity of a fake tan. They disappear once people have cast their vote, and then people are back on their own again.
The duo both turned up the heat when prompted to talk about China's forward-leaning presence in the Pacific. Albanese used this moment to bring up the sale of the Port of Darwin to Chinese firm Landbridge for $506 million for a 99-year lease.
I'll make this comment, Scott. When I was a minister, we put US Marines into Darwin. When you've been a minister, we've had the Port of Darwin sold to a company connected with the Chinese Communist Party.
Not by the Commonwealth
So by your party, your party with your tick-off.
You've been telling this lie for some time.
Your party with your tick-off. You allowed it to happen.
No, we didn't. The federal government had absolutely no authority over that sale whatsoever.
Interesting, considering in March, Morrison said he put legislation in place to make sure that the government kept a hawk eye on what was going on in that port. This has been Jackie's Opinions.
Thanks very much for that, Jackie. All I can say is you've brought back some really horrible memories of that debate. Yeah. You know, I didn't want to relive that, but thank you for making me relive it, and thank you for making all of us relive it. Yeah, but well done.
Thank you.
I think it was a great inaugural Opinions.
Inaugural Opinions. I had lots more, but I had time constraints, so I will cope with that. An interesting seat that we know we've just lost is Boothby. That was a marginal seat that we've lost, that has been lost and by the coalition, and Labor has taken it. We're heading now over to Studio B, so let's cross with them now.
Thanks, Jacqueline. We love Studio B, our state-of-the-art virtual studio, and we have a lot of seats, a lot of results for you. Let's start in Geelong with Corangamite. So we've got the results up here on the screen. Let's go over and let's take a bit of a closer look there, if we can get it up. So the ALP now pulling out in front of, again, the very famous, the former mayor of Geelong. So it looks like that seat might be retained by the ALP. Let's keep going now. We're going to go and hop over to Hughes in New South Wales. This again was Craig Kelly's seat. Freedom, freedom, freedom. Doesn't look like they're big fans of that. He's you can see him at the bottom of the screen. He might actually be hidden by some text at the bottom there, but he is on that screen. So there we go. You can see it on mine. But yeah, the Liberal Party, a very strong seat for the Liberal Party there. So it looks like the United Australia Party might lose their leader before they even get into government. Now let's go over to Dixon in Queensland. I'm a Queenslander, and Peter Dutton there. Still very much in front. That's where he's been all night. So it looks like that's a very safe seat. Ali France there, that's her second attempt at trying to unseat Peter Dutton. And she's got to second place, but it doesn't look like she'll get over the line this time. Let's move on again to Chisholm, back in Melbourne now. This is where Gladys Liu was. We had the controversy with the signs, but it looks like again there. No, there we go, an upset. So the ALP pulling in front there, Karina Garland, is the challenger, and it looks like perhaps she might take that seat from Gladys. Let's go even further now. We're going to stay actually in Melbourne. We're going to stay now with Kooyong. So Kooyong was Josh Frydenberg, and ooh, that's close. Let's see if we can get in on that. So Monique Ryan there, a challenger. It looks like she is just behind, but that's by about 20 votes. 20 votes in that one. So it's going to come really down to preferences there. So that one is going to be one to watch, and it's really going to go down to the wire. Let's stay in Melbourne with Casey. Now, this is the seat of retiring Speaker Tony Smith. He's had that seat since 2001, but last year he said he doesn't want to be the Speaker of the House anymore. He's stepping away from politics. So the big question here is, will they stick with the Liberal Party? And, you know, it doesn't look like we'll find out from that chart. No party names there. So we'll move right along, swiftly along to Bass, with Bridget Archer, again famously crossed the floor, one of the 5 against the religious discrimination bill. Let's take a look. Very safely holding that seat there. Labor, yeah, a bit further behind. Will Greens' preferences get them over the line though? Again, we live in a very dynamic democracy with our preference system, and so it really is going to come down to the line with a lot of these seats. Let's go to Indy now. They're supporting independent Karen Phelps. So very apt name there. Let's see. No, not Karen Phelps, Helen Haynes. Helen looks like she'll retain that seat as well. So let's now finish on Goldstein. Now, this was the battle between Zoe Daniel, ABC journalist, and Josh Frydenberg. Will she unseat the Treasurer? Let's have a look at the numbers over here. And let's take a closer look. Tim Wilson just out in front. Zoe Daniel there, independent, just a bit behind. Will the ALP preferences, though, get her over the line? They just might, because 675, if you add that, that would put her over the top. So again, preferences are really going to be the story of this election. As now these seats get tighter and we get more numbers, what we're going to do coming to you for the rest of the night now is we're going to start showing you 2 candidate preferred swings. So we'll look at those preferences and we can see how really they're coalescing. But the ABC has called a lot of seats. We're stealing their homework a bit there. So let's look. Currently, they've called 45 seats for the Labor Party, or 54, and they've called about 18 for the Nationals. So a net loss there of 19 so far. Looks like a very good night for Labor so far, but again, it'll take a couple of hours to really see the results of this election. Those white seats, they're going to take a long while. So we'll stay with you into the night, and possibly we'll have a result a bit later on. Back to you, Jack and Tom.
Thank you for that. It's great having Studio B there for some analysis. Now, we've just seen that overall Labor is winning now with a 60 seats to 46 seats for the Liberals, 2-party preferred, that
62 to 47 now.
62 to 47, just changed. And the second thing that I just wanted to say is what I just said about Boothby before we went to Studio B is that it's actually now swung back over to the Liberal side, so not such a big deal as I made it out to be.
It's been taken off an ALP seat and they've given it back now.
Yeah, giving it back.
Not sure, which is interesting. But Two big seats that the Labor has been targeting for the last few months has been Chisholm and Reid. Chisholm, of course, Gladys Liu's seat, which she held by 0.5%. Now, both of them are currently looking like they're going to swing towards Labor, Sam, aren't they?
Yes, that's absolutely right. We've got Reid, which has a 6% swing to ALP, and then Chisholm, which has a 3% swing to ALP. But the sort of interesting trend to notice here is that you've got Reid and Chisholm, but then you've also got Parramatta, you've got Bennelong, which are both swinging towards Labor, and then you've also got Fowler, which seems to be swinging away from Labor towards that independent. But the thing that unites those is all of those electorates have less than 45% of people who are born in Australia. So really high migrant population, that's where we're seeing these sort of fluctuations where seats are actually changing. Obviously, the way that the major parties, or particularly the coalition, are forming their policies for people for migrants is obviously not speaking to them, and it's leading to swings to Labor.
Really good. So now we're heading over to Olivia Wentworth. She is at Dave Sharma's HQ. Dave Sharma being a big prominent Liberal MP.
Yeah, it's in a very tight seat. It'll be interesting. So are we there, Olivia?
Hello, Olivia. How are you going?
Hi, I'm good. We're actually at Allegra's.
Oh, you're still at Allegra's.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we can't leave. It's such a phenomenal atmosphere here. The vibes are really high. The counting for the votes are currently sitting at 61 to Allegra, compared to 38 for Dave Sharma. So it's really interesting. We're going to have to wait and see what happens.
So obviously it's very early on in the vote, but are people excited? Are people feeling like they potentially can win this seat?
Yeah, we had a couple of live crosses from other media outlets earlier, and the electricity in this room was amazing. Everyone was really excited and showing a lot of support for the independent who is looking to take the seat after a long Liberal held seat in Wentworth.
Right. Have you got Allegra there yet? Is she there?
We don't. We haven't been able to grab her yet, but we're hoping she'll come soon and we'll be able to speak to her for a little bit. And yeah.
So you said that you didn't want to leave the Allegra Spender party because obviously there's a great vibe. So that obviously is saying a bit about the feelings and the feeling inside the room about the way that tonight's going to be going.
I think there's a strong confidence in the room tonight. I think everyone here is really feeling good about tonight's results.
Absolutely. Well, we hope you enjoy the rest of the night, and keep us updated with how's it going at that crucial seat of Wentworth, which is very interesting to see how Allegra Spender will go against the Liberal Dave Sharma. Thank you very much for that, Olivia.
Thank you.
Let's head back now to Studio B again. Oh, no, we are staying with us. What were we just talking about here? What have we got?
Well, actually, one of the interesting sort of developments has been that Zali Steggall looks like she's going to maintain her seat in Warringah. We know that she managed to take that from Tony Abbott at the last election. But what Simon Birmingham, current coalition senator, has come out criticising the coalition's pre-selection of Catherine Deves. So he's essentially said that he's seeing that the Liberal vote is going backwards, and he was already disappointed to see that an independent would take away the seat from someone like an ex-PM like Tony Abbott, but that he's even more disappointed that we're no longer seeing sort of a strong coalition vote in that seat. It's now quite entrenched that that's an independent seat.
Yeah.
Which was once a stronghold, and now even the leader of the Liberal Party can't even pick his own candidate and get them over the line in that seat, which is quite a big move. And obviously you said before that there was 3 seats that Labor looks like they might be able to, 5 seats that Labor might be able to pick up at the moment you were talking about, which would get them around 73 seats, which is nearly all they'll need to form a minority government if we expect Adam Bant to hold on and the Tasmanian member. So there could be a night for the ALP then tonight.
Yeah, I just want to remind the viewers that the seat that we're talking about with Zali Steggall is the seat that our guest Kian was talking about when we were talking about Catherine Deves, who came out and said some pretty salacious, awful things about trans teenagers and trans children even. So very good, in my opinion, to see that she hasn't gotten in. But that's a little editorial, little bit of opinions, which is not supposed to happen. Now, we want to just talk about ghost candidates.
Which is a new phenomenon. We've never heard of them before. So a ghost candidate, they've never be heard. But at the moment, when we talk about ghost candidates, we're usually referring to the One Nation Party, because on the eve of the cutoff that the AEC requires for you to submit your application to run for an electorate, the One Nation Party followed the United Australia Party and said that they would have 151 members
they're everywhere,
running in every single electorate, which was their big show that they're very serious about winning seats. Now, the problem was around 90 of those members were put up in the last few hours until the deadline.
Yeah.
And supposedly, the One Nation Party was telling members, you won't have to campaign, you won't have to be seen, nothing, just put your name down and we'll put you at a seat, which has led to some people not even really knowing that they're running because we can't make contact with them, we haven't seen them. And it's quite an interesting thing that's happened this election, because we've got people who are running for seats in Victoria, in New South Wales, in ACT, and yet they're living in Bundaberg or in Cairns or high up in Queensland, and they're 1,500 kilometres away from their electorate. Now,
we'll just remind ourselves too that Pauline Hanson has COVID that she got in the final days.
She did, and that might have stopped our opportunity to be able to see some of these candidates who we haven't been able to see throughout the election.
I don't know. Yeah. Now we can't see her either. Well, she did tweet very funnily, I thank all of those people who have sent their well wishes. I look forward to disappointing all of those who hope that I drop dead. So that's exciting, but funnier than that is what we've got here. We've got some props.
So we said that we couldn't see any of the candidates or couldn't speak to any of the candidates, which is a shame. But thankfully, One Nation has provided photos with all of the candidates on their how to vote cards. So here we've got Dean Fisher of the One Nation Party. We've also got Adam Stepanoff, who is the same person.
We can do it to a different camera if we need to see more closely. We'll hold it to camera 5 here. See there.
The same people, Adam and Dean.
Adam
same
and
people.
Dean in
Twins are running for.
Twins in their yellow blazers.
We've also got Ben Ferguson as well.
And we'll hold that over here.
Very good to get twin representation in the electorate, I think.
We'll have that at camera 5.
And also we've got Vanessa Atkinson. We've got Deborah Ann, Josh Coyne, and Haddon Irvin. Of course, all of these people, they're
all identical.
I think they're quintuplets, are they? They're all the same.
All of them. Deborah, Josh.
All look the same. And this, I must add, this isn't just the only 9.
No, this is our.
We couldn't print all of them. There was actually over 20 candidates that have the exact same photos online. So it starts to make you think, like, who are these people? If we can't contact them.
We didn't want to waste too much ink or paper either to get them all, but it's interesting because even I think specifically with one of them, and I couldn't remember his or her name because we don't know who's who. We did search one of them up, and we found that there are like 5 profiles of that person's name. But you were going to say something?
I was going to say that this could potentially, in terms of trying to work out why this might be beyond just raising the profile of One Nation and being just hilarious, that it could also be that there is a sort of a threshold of the primary vote that a party needs to get before they will receive money from the AEC. Of
course.
So by running candidates, by One Nation running candidates across the country, they will inevitably receive votes because there will be people who want to vote for One Nation in all the different seats. And out of that One Nation, they might not gain many seats, but they certainly will gain more votes, which means more money.
Very good. So we're going to head back now over to Studio B where Gabriel is. Hello, Gabriel.
Have we got any people from One Nation making any runs? Technical difficulties there. We'll see. Maybe see if we can. Now, while we're talking about this, it is interesting that the AEC have said that it's completely legal for these candidates not to live, even in the same state, and still run in the seats of Melbourne when they live in a different state.
It just says to me that it's just exposure. It's just seeing the party's name on the, your how to vote, sorry, not your how to vote, but on your actual green ballot paper for the House of Reps. But we're hearing now we can go back to Studio B.
We're going to go to Georgie, actually, I think we're going to go to.
Are
so, Georgie, how is everything over there?
Georgie,
you right there, Georgie?
You're on.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah, can you? So currently 28.2% of votes for the electorate of Casey have been counted. So it isn't a lot. But currently Anthony Green has projected Aaron Violi to win by 53.1. Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
You can hear me? Great. 53.4%. It's just updated. 38 out of 61 centres are reporting primaries. 24 out of 61 are reporting a preference count. Obviously, it's very early days. But yeah, we'll have to see what happens. But yeah, that's sort of where we're at the moment.
So the mood's a little bit lower there now, is it?
I think that a lot of people are sort of a bit caught up in the moment. I don't know if lots of people are looking at the numbers and looking at their phones at the moment. I mean, as I said, like, it is such early days. Like only 29.6% of votes have been counted. But yeah, it will be really interesting to sort of see how things progress during the night. But yeah, that's sort of where we're at the moment. And yeah, I think this will be my final cross for the night.
It will be, Georgie.
So,
thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been great to be here. And yeah, thank you.
Hopefully there's some shifts in the polls and you get a bit more of an exciting night at your party that you're at.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Georgie. Thank you very much.
All right. So now we're coming to the kind of end of our production here.
Well, we should check in with Studio B.
We'll check in with Studio B. Yep.
How you going, Gabe?
Hey guys, look, I'm sorry about before. Joys of live TV, hey? And look, it's coming up to 8:30 now. The ABC's own Anthony Green told us earlier today that if we didn't have a clear winner by 7:30 p.m, we'd be in for a long night. So I hope everyone's had a Red Bull, coffee, whatever floats your boat. For a start though, we're gonna have a look at Koo Yong, one of the most talked about seats this election. And it looks like Frydenberg is in, quote, the fight of his life. With Monique Ryan right now showing a 42% swing. And look, Frydenberg won that seat last election in 2019 with a 5.7% margin. So massive results coming in for Koo Yong. Obviously still early in the count, but if they keep this momentum up, who knows where they can go. To Goldstein now though, another hotly contested seat this election. It was held by Tim Wilson by a margin of 7.8% last election. It looks like Zoe Daniel is now swinging towards a 6.8% margin. So that's very exciting, and we'll be sure to bring you the news there as it comes in. On other seats though, we've got Leafy Chisholm, beautiful part of the world, where the Liberals hold that margin by 0.5% from 2019. It looks like Gladys Liu is on the loss though there, with Labor challenger Karina Garland up 2.2% with 13% of the votes counted. And again, always fun to watch Corangamite every election. It's changed 4 times since 2007, currently held by Labor incumbent Libby Coker. She's still up 0.8% with 7.3% of the votes counted. So look, obviously it is still too early to tell in these battleground seats, but we'll be sure to bring you updates as they come in. Tom, Jackie?
We've had some very interesting analysis done by that studio all through tonight.
Really good analysis from that studio. Really grateful for that studio and its producers. It's been amazing to be on air tonight. We are wrapping up. What is the time? Couple of minutes left. A few things to discuss seats-wise. We've got Labor winning in the polls from 62. What have we got?
62-47. We're seeing around a 1% swing away from Liberals. Is that right, Sam?
Away from Liberals and I believe towards Labor. I think that is sort of how it's cooking up. But yeah, still, it has sort of been said by Anthony Green, the ABC's election analyst and someone we all love.
God.
Yes, that generally it's probably going to be a long night. That a hung parliament is certainly a possibility, and yeah, it'll be a while to sort of see how the cookie crumbles.
Exactly, and at the top of the show, we said that Labor would have to win at least 5 seats to hopefully get that minority government. They're currently ahead in Chisholm, Higgins, Reid and Robertson, 4 of the 13 seats that they were targeting very strongly and thought they had a really good chance of winning. So that's interesting. If this trend continues, maybe Labor might be able to pull through and get that majority. Who knows? Or they might be able to get those 5 seats that they thought they could get and maybe get the support from some independents and 4 minorities. So there's a lot still to go on for tonight. It's going to be a very long night, I feel, but it'll be interesting to see how it all ends up.
We'll all be off celebrating together, I think, but we'd also love to thank the Swanston Gazette, the Journalism Society from RMIT. We would like to thank our other crossers from University of Sydney. I would like to thank my 2 boys here on either side, and I would like to thank, who was that say?
The Junction.
The Junction as well. We'd like to thank The Junction and our wonderful executive producer, Chantel Hayden, who has been fantastic.
And our amazing Studio B team as well. It's been a great night. Wouldn't you agree, Sam?
Tito,
absolutely.
Tito and Janak, who have just held our hands the whole time.
Yes.
It's been absolutely thrilling. Thank you for watching and have a good night.
Thank you very much.